Marshall Peak. Chapter 5974. Long-term goal. Strictly speaking, this second crusade was taking place despite the human race not being fully prepared. Readiness was not a matter of willpower, but rather an accumulation of strength. It was easy to see just by the results alone. Without the help of Xueqi and the small stone race army, the human race would have been defeated already. The original plan was for Mi Jingluan to withdraw with the army and wait for Yang Kai to return before leading the survivors to a new, distant world. Once they left, this whole region, covering the entire 3,000 worlds, would surely fall under the Black Ink clan's total control. Was it because the human race did not fight hard enough? Was it because the heavens did not favor them enough? It was neither. Great potential could erupt from a race during the critical juncture between life and death. In just a short few thousand years, the human race has grown from near total decimation to recovering the 3,000 worlds and the no-return pass, but that was already their limit. If they had not worked hard enough, they would not possess the heritage they have today, and if the heavens did not favor them, they would not have the open heaven realm cradles. However, when it came to facing powerful foes like the Black Ink clan, what ultimately mattered was strength. The time given to the human race was too short, so no matter whether or not they were ready for this crusade, they had to go on. That was because Mo was about to awaken. Under such circumstances, it was better to be proactive than reactive. After all these years of fighting, the human race army had already been tempered into one entity after going through the baptism of war, but it was still not enough. As the battle raged on, Mi Jingluan weighed his options before deciding to give up on supporting the small stone race army. The battle had not reached an end yet, and the small stone race army should have enough troops to hold their own. What's more, after this battle came to an end, there would be an even more treacherous one waiting for the human race army. The current human race army had to recover its strength for that impending moment. On the battlefield, cloud after dazzling cloud of purifying light erupted and filled the vast void, dispersing not only the scattered Black Ink strength, but also the Black Ink clan soldiers that were enveloped in it, severely damaging their foundation. The current situation on the battlefield was extremely bad for the Black Ink clan. The primordial heaven's source grand restriction was no longer providing reinforcements, and even the royal lords did not dare to go near the opening to check out the situation for fear of being seen by Xueqi and drawing her wrath upon themselves. On the other hand, the small stone race soldiers still had a steady stream of reinforcements pouring endlessly out of the void corridor and entering the battlefield. Even though the Black Ink clan had tens of millions of troops left, it was still difficult to hold off their enemies effectively after losing the few royal lords and pseudo-royal lords they had to the 8 Ninth Order small stone race masters. The 2 giant spirit gods rampaged, and the 8 Ninth Order small stone race masters were also advancing like they were chopping down bamboo. Division after division of uniformed small stone race troops swarmed in from all directions. The circle was constantly shrinking, and lives from the Black Ink clan dissipated alongside its progress. It wouldn't be long before the small stone race army was able to wipe out the Black Ink clan forces scattered outside of the primordial heaven's source grand restriction. On the 2306th world, where Yang Kai was suppressing and sealing Mo's source, a large battle was similarly going on. Mu's shadow was holding back the many Black Ink disciples of this world on her own so that Yang Kai could suppress and seal the source piece in peace. Summoning the profound source gate, a slit cracked open from the gate. Within its suppressing and sealing territory, Mo's source piece poured out. As with all the times before it, the source piece seemed to be pulled by an inexplicable force towards the open gate. Yang Kai had witnessed this scene many times before and was not the least bit surprised. According to Mu, the profound source gate was a supreme treasure born alongside the universe, outside which the primordial light was born, and behind which the primordial darkness was nurtured. The primordial light was symbolic of all the brightness and wonderfulness of this universe. Not bound by the profound source gate, it left after its inception, but the darkness born within the profound source gate could not as easily escape. That was until the primordial darkness gained sentience of its own after accumulating for endless years. That was Mo. For Mo, the profound source gate had the natural power to suppress and seal it, which was why Mu hid the profound source gate in the primordial world. Only the profound source gate could suppress and seal Mo's source. Each of the previous attempts was uneventful. Once the profound source gate was summoned and opened up, the source piece would be drawn into it and sealed. But this time, things were not quite the same. Yang Kai could clearly sense Mo's source piece struggling violently, as if it had a consciousness of its own, trying to escape the pull of the profound source gate. However, it was still only a small piece of a whole, and in the end, it could not resist the profound source gate's power. As the source piece was about to pour through the gate, a pair of eyes suddenly opened in the darkness. The eyes were so indescribably black that they seemed to contain all the darkness in existence. Even Yang Kai could not help but feel a chill run through his body as they stared at him. Fortunately, it was just for a moment before the source piece disappeared into the gate, and the chilling sensation disappeared without a trace. We're reaching the limit. Yang Kai had a feeling. He had traveled through more than 2,000 worlds on his journey, and had managed to suppress and seal almost 1,000 pieces of Mo's source. Mu had divided Mo's source into 3,000 pieces and sealed them into 3,000 different universe worlds, and through his journey, Yang Kai managed to suppress and seal a lot of them despite all the twists and turns he encountered along his way. This amount was almost 30% of Mo's source pieces, which was already a very fruitful number. The more source pieces that were suppressed and sealed, the greater of an impact there would be on Mo. Even if Mo were to awaken completely at this moment, its strength would still drop drastically from its peak due to its compromised source. But it was still not enough. After all, Mo was said to be in the legendary creation realm. Without facing it directly, nobody could predict just how powerful it really was. Even without 30% of its sources, its remaining strength was still great enough that it was not something the current human race could contend with. Yang Kai was slightly relieved to have gotten some news about Zhang Ruoxi from Wu Kuang. Wu Kuang's thread of consciousness only had a faint connection to his true self outside, so his perception of things was not very clear. So not only did Yang Kai find his information to be unbelievable, but even Wu Kuang himself could not be sure. Regardless, he had to speed things up on his end. Before Mo awakened, he had to suppress and seal as many of the source pieces as possible, even if it was just one more. Senior! Yang Kai turned around and shouted as he withdrew the profound source gate. Hearing this, Mu, who was helping to ward off the countless black ink disciples, rushed to his side and raised her palm, gracefully patting downwards. Following that, amidst the furious roars of the many black ink disciples, Yang Kai's body turned into a stream of light and took off into the sky. In the primordial world, Little 11th's illness was getting worse. His small body was as cold as ice one moment, and as hot as magma the next. At first, he was able to keep himself conscious, but by now, he was mostly asleep, and the time he could stay awake was getting shorter and shorter. As he slept, he was haunted by unceasing nightmares that caused him to shake and shiver constantly. Mu remained by his side, watching him carefully. When Little 11th finally woke up and opened his eyes, he saw Mu sitting by his bedside, holding him gently. Mu seemed to have sensed his movements as she looked down at him, her eyes bloodshot. She had no idea how long it had been since she had properly rested. "You're awake." Mu opened her mouth, but her throat sounded very dry. Looking at the red blood vessels in Mu's eyes, Little 11th's heart ached. A sour taste filled his mouth and even the corners of his eyes grew wet. He turned his head away and wiped the corners of his eyes with his hand, answering with a soft hum. Mu placed her hand on Little 11th's forehead and felt it carefully for a moment before saying joyfully, "Your fever has gone down. How are you feeling now?" Little 11th was silent for a moment before saying, "Much better." Mu smiled and withdrew her hand. "Good. Get some more sleep and you should get better then." Little 11th opened his mouth. "Sixth sister, I don't want to sleep." He had slept enough already. "Then what do you want to do?" "I want some congee." The sister and brother, unrelated by blood, had been living together and relying on each other for survival in this bustling city. Mu had cooked many delicious foods for Little 11th, but what he wanted most at this moment was the plain rice congee cooked by her. This was the first food he had eaten since waking up in this world. "Sure," Mu raised her hand and gave him an affectionate tickle on the nose before getting up. "In that case, wait here for a while." Little 11th fell silent. Very soon, the congee was ready. Mu brought in the pot of cooked congee and was just about to serve Little 11th a bowl when she saw him get out of bed, sit by the table, and pull the pot closer to himself. Mu laughed. "You're planning to eat that much? Be careful or you'll spoil your tummy." Little 11th huffed. "I want to eat. It's not like my tummy is weak." Mu was helpless. Good, you can have it all. If you can't finish it, then you better watch out or I'll spank your bottom." Little 11th couldn't help but clench his but a little and blushed. "I'm not a child anymore, stop spanking me for no reason." As soon as he finished speaking, Mu pressed on his nose with a finger, immediately creating a pig's nose on Little 11th's face. Little 11th shook his head in annoyance and sniffled. You're so childish. You're always doing these childish things. Moo covered her lips and giggled, but she stopped teasing him, instead handing over the wooden spoon she brought. Little 11th picked up the bowl and held the clay pot in his arms, digging into his meal. Moo sat by quietly, watching him, saying from time to time, "Eat slowly and be careful so you don't burn yourself. It's not like anyone is going to steal it from you." From time to time, she would help him wipe the corners of his mouth. The freshly cooked congee was so hot that Little 11th kept sucking in his breath. Even his face had grown red and his head was steaming from the heat. It took about an hour, but he did manage to finish it eventually. Even the bottom of the pot was scraped clean without a drop left behind. Moo peered into the pot and joked, "If you ate nicely like that every time, I could save the effort of washing the dishes." Little 11th rubbed his round tummy and made a face at her. "Then won't you turn into a lazy woman? Be careful or you won't be able to get married in the future." Moo raised her hand and smacked him upside the head. "It's not up to you to say whether I can get married or not." Little 11th held his head with both hands and complained, "You're hitting me again, I'm still a patient." Moo raised her hand as if to strike him again, but in the end, she just stroked his head gently. Little 11th lowered his head. The atmosphere turned silent. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5975. Hello, we finally meet. In a humble house on the edge of Dawn City, a pair of sister and brother sat opposite each other. Only after a long time did Little 11th speak. "Sixth sister. What's the matter? Let's talk after I've finished washing the dishes, all right?" Moo smiled, got up, and picked up the clay pot before walking out. Looking at her back, Little 11th sighed, a sadness that did not match his age appearing on his small face. The dust-covered memories from long ago began to stir. In the boundless darkness, where not a trace of light could be seen, a consciousness began to emerge. At first, it was dull and incomplete, just fumbling through the infinite darkness by instinct. After an unknown period of time had passed, that consciousness slowly became complete, and as it did so, it gradually became aware of its surroundings. It was as if it was trapped in a strange place, a place of nihility and emptiness where time flowed endlessly, and that made it feel lonely. It began to consciously search for a way out so that it could escape from this place that was keeping it trapped, but it did not even know why it wanted to leave. All its thoughts and actions were purely based on its instinct. It took action, but to no avail, and after long years of suffering, it finally found the way out of that place. However, there was a tightly sealed gate blocking the way. It tried with all its might to break it down, but it was as if the strange gate had a complete suppressive power against it. No matter how hard it tried, it could not budge it in the slightest. Day after day, year after year, it gradually came to feel an emotion called despair. It understood that it was impossible for it to open the gate with its own power. Despair never came without reason. It only appeared when one's hopes were extinguished. For countless years it lived in this dark, lonely world, never understanding what despair meant, until the seed of hope was planted in it. Ironically, from the same gate it found. Countless years of hard work came to nothing in the end, and the ultimate decision to give up was overwhelmingly frustrating. Perhaps it was destined to live in this dark world forever, it thought. That was until one day, it suddenly heard some strange noises when it was sleeping peacefully behind the gate. Until then, it had never even known that such a thing as sound existed in this world. Where it lived, not only was there no light, there was not even a hint of sound. Complete and utter silence. It was awoken from its slumber and listened to the sweet sound of that voice. At that time, it had no idea what that voice was saying. It was not until later that it understood that the person was knocking softly at the gate, asking in a loud voice, "Is anyone there? Hello? Is anyone home?" The flames of hope were rekindled in the ashes of despair that had been tormenting it for countless years. It fought hard to make as much noise as possible from behind the gate, hoping that it could reach the outside. The person at the gate must have noticed it and said gleefully, "Ah, someone's home? Could you please open the gate?" But how could it? It would have done so already if it could. Moreover, it could not even understand what the person was saying at the time. All it could do was keep on making noise in order to make its presence known, praying in its heart that the owner of that voice would not leave no matter what. It had been alone for countless years, and even if it could never leave this desolate world, it was happy as long as the voice outside that gate would not fade away and if it could listen to it in silence. "Are you unable to get out?" The person at the gate began to ask again, seemingly having guessed its situation. The response was always some dull thumping sounds. I understand now. You're trapped. It dawned on the person outside the gate. How pitiful. In that case, let me give you a hand. The next thing it felt was that the gate which had always remained still began to shake. It was taken aback, yet excited at the same time. But in the end, the gate still did not open. After a long time, that pleasant-sounding voice emerged from outside the gate again. This gate seems to be an innate supreme treasure. I am not able to open it with my current strength, but I feel that I should be able to open it once I get stronger. Can you wait in there for a while longer? I'll go and cultivate, then come back to you later. It had no idea what the voice was saying. All it knew was that the person left after speaking those words. Its hopes were crushed yet again, and it continued to sink into this dead world, where the boundless despair that enveloped it also continued to make it stronger. It was not until many years later that the voice appeared once more. Overjoyed, it made some noise at the gate as soon as possible. Sure enough, the voice that had once appeared noticed its presence and spoke a few words to it, then fiddled with the gate for a while before leaving again for the second time. But this time, it no longer despaired. It vaguely understood what the person beyond the gate was trying to do, so even in the midst of the boundless world of desolation, it was full of hope and expectation. And so it waited. And waited. In the endless years that followed, in the long river of time that was far too long to trace back, the two powerful existences, one inside and one outside, gradually became acquainted and formed a relationship of tacit understanding with each other. And as the person outside was talking to themselves, it got to learn their language and could already begin to communicate with them in a simple way. For it, this was an exceptionally wonderful experience, and the dark world in which it lived was no longer as dreary because in the midst of that darkness was a heart filled with hope. It remembered vividly the conversation that took place between them, even when that person outside the gate arrived for the 7th time to try and let it out but failed. I've already cultivated into the peak of the 9th order, but how come this gate still won't open? How annoying. Annoying. It repeated, not so much frustrated as happy. Its greatest wish was no longer to open the gate and leave this place, but to have someone to accompany it outside the gate and talk to it. That alone was enough to satisfy it. Being able to hear her speak filled it with so much joy each time that it would roll around behind that gate for days on end. I have to figure out a way, but the 9th order should already be the upper limit of the open heaven realm. What must I do to break through even further above that? The person behind the gate sounded worried. There was nothing it could do to help in these circumstances. It did not even know what the 9th order was, or what the open heaven realm meant. This won't do, I have to go. The humans are currently in a bad situation since the great monsters are not easy to deal with. But rest assured, none of them are as powerful as I am. I'll come back for you once the situation stabilizes. Maybe then I'll be able to open this gate and let you out. Hearing that person's words, it knew that she would be leaving again. Even though it was reluctant to part with her, it couldn't stop her. In the end, it could only give a stiff reminder, take care, be safe. I will. The person outside the gate answered gleefully. The final wait felt unbearably long, seemingly lasting much longer than the times before. So, it kept waiting at the gate, making some noise from time to time as if afraid that that person would not notice its presence when she arrived. Eventually that person came. Listen, the world is such an amazing place. There's actually a thing called the universe furnace, and it appeared out of nowhere a few years ago, and I went inside. There was a really, really long river in there, and I have no idea where the source is or where it ends, so I call it the infinite river. What's a river? It asked. A river. It's hard to explain, but once you come out, you'll know if I bring you there. Besides the river, there were also big mountains. Oh, what else? Then, I emulated the infinite river and refined a long river of my own, but it was still a far cry from that infinite river. Still, I am now much stronger than before, and I have a very strong feeling that I will be able to open the gate this time. And so, it responded, you say that every time you come here, but then you fail every time. The person outside sounded disgruntled. Wow, you've actually learned to insult me. That makes me mad. No, I wasn't trying to. It felt guilty and apologized in a panic. The person outside the gate giggled. The sound of her laughter sounded even better than before. I was just kidding. You're so gullible. After making sure that she wasn't really angry, it finally felt at ease. All right, I'm going to open the gate now, so stand back, or I might accidentally hurt you," said the person outside the gate. And so, it moved away from the gate as it was told, and the next thing it knew, the tightly closed gate began to rumble and shake even more violently than ever before. It was sure from this that the person on the other side had indeed increased their strength greatly, and became much stronger than previously. This also helped to give it more confidence in that person, thinking that there might actually be hope of the gate opening this time. Hope came quickly, and with a violent movement outside, the gate that had been tightly shut all this time parted to either side, gradually revealing an opening. When the light from the outside pierced through the darkness, it couldn't help but lose itself for a moment, staring in awe at the light that it had never seen before with both mind and body trembling. So this was the legendary light. Even a being born in darkness like it had an innate yearning and thirst for such light. Just this ray of light taught it that the world outside was countless times more exciting than the place where it was born. "It won't open any more than this," the person outside the gate yelled in a strained voice. "This is the limit. Quickly, get into my space-time river. I'll pull you out." As soon as she spoke, a great river came tumbling through the opening, pouring into the endless darkness. It dared not hesitate and plunged headlong into the river. Immediately afterwards, it felt a mysterious force drawing it towards the opening in the gate. Almost at the very moment that it exited the opening, the gate that had been opened closed shut again. The space-time river, which she had yet to fully withdraw, was even cut off and part of it was left in the darkness forever. However, it was oblivious to such a thing happening. It was fighting its way up the river, and the moment that light filled its vision, it finally saw the figure that had been accompanying it outside the gate for countless years. There was a touch of crimson at the corner of that person's mouth. She wiped it away as if it were nothing. Grinning, she looked at the black blob that had floated out from her space-time river and greeted it with familiarity. "Hello. We meet at last. Sullivan." This just makes a mess of the whole story. So it was not the 10 that found Mo. These two met beforehand. "Not sure how I can fix this equals okay. So, I went back and changed it in a way that made Mu hesitate to say what had happened. Since we have Tsong also telling the same story as Mu, let's just pretend that the 10 agreed upon this story so that Mu won't get blamed." Marshall Peak. Chapter 5976. Siblings. Speaking of which, I haven't asked for your name yet. My name is Mu, what's yours? It would never forget their first meeting. There was a touch of red blood on the corners of her lips as this quiet and gentle woman stood in the void, looking at it with a smile on her face. "What is my name?" It had no idea what its name was. It did not even realize that such a thing as a name existed in this world. Before meeting her, its world was nothing more than endless darkness and desolation. It was because it met her that its world now had sound, had expectations, and today light had also become a part of it. "I don't know what my name is," it mumbled in reply. Inexplicably, a lowly feeling of shame took root in it, as if it had blasphemed her just by looking at her like this. "No name, huh?" Mu walked around it, then she suddenly clapped her hands and smiled. "I know. Seeing as how you're so dark, your name should be Mo." "Mo," it murmured, and then it slowly beamed. "My name is Mo." It had its own name now, and it was Mu who gave it to it. It was determined not to lose it in its life, and one day, it would let everyone know its name. But soon, it realized that its appearance was not quite the same as Mu's. Mu had arms and legs, a head and a body, and she was even wearing pretty clothes. She was such a pretty person. It also wished that it. As those thoughts ran through its mind, the round black blob without a fixed shape began to warp, gradually transforming until it looked just like Mu. Mu looked at it in surprise. "You can even assume human form, but this won't do, you can't look like me." Mo was puzzled. "Why?" Mu kindly explained, "Because everyone is unique in this world." Mo didn't quite understand, but if Mu had said it, then it must be true. It was a shame that it couldn't look like her. She definitely had the most beautiful appearance in this world, it thought to itself. "Then what should I look like?" Mo asked. "Just the way you were is good too." After a pause, she added, "But if you have to assume human form, then why don't I give you a hand?" "With what?" "Changing your appearance." Mu reached out her hands and pounced on it with a teasing grin on her face. Then she began to rub and shape it. Mo did not resist, allowing her to do as she pleased. Mu worked for quite a while before taking a few steps back and studying Mo carefully, after which she nodded in satisfaction. "There, that'll be your look." Mo held out its hands and spread them out in front of itself, feeling confused as it looked at its small hands. Seeing its confusion, Mu took the initiative to explain, "This is what my brother looked like, but he died when he was very young, so you can take his form from now on." "Okay." Mo responded obediently. Mu then looked up at the profound source gate again and rushed over to it with excitement. "This gate is a treasure. It ate a part of my space-time river, so I'll have to take it with me." She then turned to Mo. "This is the door to your home, do you still want it?" Mo waved his hand. "I don't want it, you can have it." "Who would even want such a thing?" Mu nodded. "In that case I won't stand on ceremony." The space-time river was summoned again and wrapped itself around the strange gate. Perhaps because a piece of her space-time river was left inside the gate. This time, Mu was able to collect it with ease. "Let's go." Mu beckoned Mo and led him away into the distance. On the way, Mo asked the question that was on his mind. "Mu, what is death?" "Death. If a person dies, then we will never be able to see each other again, and that person will only live on in the memories of others." "What is a little brother?" "Well, it's a sibling born from one's parents." "Then, am I your little brother?" "Yes, you'll be my little brother from now on." "You're my little brother too." "That's not right. I'm your big sister. Sixth sister to be exact." "What is a big sister?" A big sister is a sibling born from one's own parents." "But isn't that what a little brother is?" "Hey, listen, a little brother should speak less because if he talks too much, his mouth will glue shut and he'll never be able to open it again." Shocked, Mo covered his mouth in a panic. "Mu, where did this little friend come from?" "This is the one I told you about, the one who was shut behind that strange gate." "You got him out of there?" A crowd of people surrounded Mu and Mo, their eyes filled with scrutiny and curiosity. Mo clung to the corner of Mu's clothes and hid behind her. It had never known that so many people existed in this world, and that they all looked different. It was no wonder why Mu said that everyone was unique. "Little friend, what's your name?" someone asked. Mo shook his head and did not answer, a timid look on his face. The speaker asked with pity in his voice, "Is he mute?" Mu laughed. "Of course not, the child is just a little shy. There is something odd about this boy. I've never seen that power inside his body before." "Mu, do you know what you've rescued?" "I'm not sure, but it was too pitiful to see him trapped behind that gate all alone. I couldn't just leave him after I discovered him. I just hope you know what you're doing." Rest assured. With how weak he is, he can't do much even if the power inside his body is a little strange. I'll keep an eye on him. That's good. Right now, the great monsters are running amok and our people are in a tough spot. We can't afford to deal with any more trouble. It was Mo's first time meeting someone other than Mu, and after a brief conversation with them, he was led off to rest by Mu. In the days that followed, they slowly came to know each other better and it became clear that Mo was no mute. Mo had also figured out the relationship between these people and Mu. The 10 of them had such a close bond that they called each other siblings. Mu was ranked 6th out of the 10, which was why Mu asked him to call her 6th sister on the way here. As he was the youngest, he was affectionately called Little 11th by everyone. Mo also finally figured out what a big sister and little brother was. It even witnessed death. In those days, the great monsters of the early ancient era were committing atrocities all across the land, and the human race chose to stand up to them. Thus everything under the heavens was put under a constant baptism of blood and war. It was not known just how many humans had thrown away their lives in those battles. For a being who had been locked behind a gate all this while, it was a great shock for Mo to suddenly see such an unimaginable scene. Because of Mu, it began to think of itself as a human, and as it watched Mu and the 9 others busying about, it too wanted to help. It wanted to kill those early ancient era great monsters and give the humans a peaceful place to live. Mo began cultivating, but the human race's open heaven realm method did not suit it at all, and no matter how hard it tried, it could not raise its cultivation. That was until one day it unwittingly felt the power surging deep inside the bodies of some of the humans, and almost instinctively, it drew that invisible and formless power into its body, refining and absorbing it. It actually felt as if it had grown a little stronger. Mo was both pleasantly surprised and horribly terrified by this discovery. It was pleasantly surprised to have found a way to cultivate, but also terrified because it had never heard of this kind of cultivation before. It went to look for Mu at once to ask for clarification. However, Mu was out fighting at that time. By the time she returned, it was several dozen years later, and Mo had grown significantly stronger. Mo could not forget the joy on Mu's face. How happy she was that it became stronger. The words that reached its mouth were stuck there. But Mo suddenly realized that this was not so bad. As long as Mu was happy, what else mattered? Having found the right path to cultivate, Mo's strength soared by leaps and bounds. One day, it would finally become strong enough to step onto the battlefield. Mu did not give it any preferential treatment just because of who it was, and Mo simply participated in its first battle against monster race as the most ordinary of human soldiers. After all, Mu was one of the 10 commanders of the human race of that era and had more important things to do than babysit. It was impossible to keep Mo by her side and watch over it at all times. During Mo's first battle, the army that it was in was ambushed by the early ancient era's great monsters and torn to pieces. The casualties they suffered were severe. Mu rushed to provide support when she received the news, but by the time she reached the battlefield, the fighting was over. Originally, she thought that Mo was already no more, but what she saw instead stunned her. The human race, which had been at an absolute disadvantage in terms of military strength, had won the battle at a huge cost, with just 30% of their forces surviving in the end. Mo stood in the middle of the bloody sea of corpses, with many of the early ancient era great monsters nearby bowing down in submission as the cheers of the surviving soldiers came like a tide. It was only after this that Mu learnt that Mo had used its power at the most critical moment, causing monster race masters to change sides, leading to their eventual victory. It was only now that she realized the special nature of black ink strength, which seemed to have the ability to twist the mind and spirit of living beings. Mo had no choice but to confess to Mu about its years of cultivation, and that subduing monster race masters with its power was just an idea that happened to crop up. It had never done it before. For the first time, Mu reprimanded him. Mo panicked, not knowing what it had done wrong, but seeing Mu's reaction, it knew it had to have done something wrong. After scolding Mo, Mu couldn't help but sigh, saying that it wasn't its fault before leaving with a grimace. As it watched Mu's somewhat sullen back, Mo vowed to itself that it would never use that method of cultivation again, nor would it ever use its power to subdue any living creature. However, things rarely went as one wished in life. As the battle between the humans and monster race raged on, the fighting only became more and more fierce. Even if the human race had the 10 martial ancestors, the early ancient era great monsters had a considerable number of powerful masters of their own. Things were looking increasingly dire for the human race, and there were even many who had submitted to the monster race, willingly becoming their slaves in order to survive. Battle after battle, Mo, who had witnessed countless deaths, could no longer resist the urge to use its power once more, twisting the hearts of the humans who turned against them. Not one person on the entire battlefield was spared during that event. Even those of the monster race were subjugated by it. In that battle, the human race army, which had not seen glory for a long time, received an overwhelming victory. Martial Peak. Chapter 5977, The Right to Live. Once the darkness was unleashed, it was difficult to seal it up again. While the 10 martial ancestors were fighting against the early ancient era great monsters at the forefront of the battlefield, Missouri subordinated batch after batch of helpers, leading the human race at the back and obtaining victory in every battle. As time passed, it became stronger and stronger. Mo had achieved what it vowed to do back then, to spread its name and make itself known to all of the humans. There was not much that it wanted from this. Mo just wished to end this war as soon as possible. Then Mu would have more time to accompany it again. It was willing to use any means to achieve that goal, bestowing great power on the humans who feared and avoided the war so that they could become fearless. It even began to spread its power to the various universe worlds, so that those people could become strong as quickly as possible. All its hard work and dedication had been worthwhile. Mu and the other 10 martial ancestors slayed many of the early ancient era great monsters at the battlefront, achieving a full victory. Meanwhile, the human race army that Mo led was also very successful on each battlefield. The living space for monster race was constantly being shrunk. The human race was about to usher in their final victory. Mo was overjoyed to see Mu again, whom it had not been able to see for many years. With great excitement, it told her about his efforts and achievements over the years, not noticing the troubled look in Mu's eyes. Mo made a wish in front of Mu, that they would never have to be separated again once the war was over. Rubbing its head, Mu agreed. From then on, Mu would bring Mo along wherever she went. Mo was no longer allowed to use the power it had used before, and it was no longer allowed to set foot on the battlefield, but it did not care. Compared to being extolled by countless humans and bending the disobedient ones to its will, Mo preferred simply staying quietly by Mu's side. The war finally came to an end and the human race emerged as the final victors, becoming the masters of the universe while the early ancient era great monsters were almost slaughtered to extinction. Even though there were still great monsters left, it was no longer possible for them to stir up any waves. Mu took Mo on a journey to witness the beauty and peace of the universe, acting like true brother and sister. During that journey, Mu showered it with nothing but care. Mo felt that even if it died at that time, it would have no regrets. Many years later, Mo would ask itself many times why it really didn't die in that beautiful memory, because its life would have been perfect if that was the case. One day, Mu said she would bring it home, to visit the place where it was born. Though it was reluctant to return to that place that had trapped it for so many years, Mo could not deny her since it was Mu who requested it. The two of them traveled together, returning to that ancient land. The other 9 big brothers had already arrived and were waiting for them. After Mu led Mo there, it keenly sensed a massive array being activated, sealing the void in all directions. Mo did not understand what was going on, until Mu told him the truth. Mo never would have thought that Mu would one day trick it like this. Shock, anger, resentment. All sorts of complicated emotions overwhelmed it. The reason Mu led it here was just so they could suppress and seal it here again, and that last journey would be its final fond experiences. Mo's heart felt as if it had been stabbed. The dependence and trust it once had turned into grief, causing Mo to lose its rationale for a moment. The power that had been built up over the years was released, and Mo's mind became completely twisted. Under Mo's influence, all the beings previously corrupted by his power were turned into slaves. The human race, which had only been at peace for a few years, was once again thrust into an endless war. Inside the small house, Mo sighed faintly as its small figure grew rapidly, transforming into a handsome young man with delicate features in the blink of an eye. He got up, walked out of the house, and looked up at the sky, his gaze absent as his mind drifted. Such an innocent memory from so long ago. Mu came out of the kitchen, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked at him with a faint smile. Are you leaving? Mo turned his head and looked at Mu with a complicated gaze before nodding gently. Mu said to him, all these years, it was Sixth Sister who wronged you. Mo raised his hand to interrupt her, smiling back. You did the right thing, Sixth Sister. Huh. Mu cocked her head at it in confusion. Mo said, I was too young then, mistakenly believing that I had full control of that power, but it proved to be too much for me to grasp. If you hadn't suppressed and sealed me back then, I'm afraid the human race would be no more. Mu was stunned for a moment, then as if understanding something, her face paled slightly. You mean? Mo sighed. That power is the root. I am only its consciousness that has been born through many long years of accumulation. Even though you have taught me about all the wonderful things in the universe, in the end, not everything is good in this world. No matter the kind of consciousness it birthed, its power will continue to grow, and one day even that consciousness will become its slave. When that happens, only one instinct will remain, to conquer and enslave everything. Just as the birth of the black ink cult was inevitable in this world, so too was all this predestined. Hearing those words from it, Mu finally understood. So, when the power was suppressed and sealed once more, it instead led you to rediscover yourself. Exactly. Mo grinned. Then now. Mo shook its head. It will all return soon. Sixth Sister. You have already fulfilled your promise. For that, I thank you. Mo looked up at Mu, tears faintly welling in his eyes. Mu promised back then that she would accompany him forever and keep him by her side wherever she went, and she had done exactly that and more. While she was alive, she was constantly watching over the primordial heaven's source grand restriction, and even in her death, the shadows she left behind continued to keep Mo company. Mu tried to make one last effort. If you like, we could go on like this. Mo shook his head sadly. I can't stop it, and besides, since I was born, I too should fight for my right to live. These words caused Mu's heart to clench. Every living being had the right to live since birth, to pursue the good things in life. But what if the existence of this being was in itself a sin? Mo looked at Mu with a deep gaze, as if he wanted to brand the figure before him into the deepest part of his mind, into his life, never to be forgotten. He then murmured softly, besides, a world without Sixth Sister no longer needs to exist. Mo opened his arms as if to embrace the entire world. Winds rose and clouds surged. A black ray of light suddenly descended and entered Mo's body, causing his aura to swell explosively. This was followed by a second, then a third. All the inhabitants of Dawn City looked up in shock, only to see an endless stream of black light coming from nowhere in the sky, falling incessantly towards a certain spot in the city where a terrifying aura was surging. The inside of the holy temple of the light spirit religion was a chaotic mess. The Order Lords wanted to go and find out what was going on, but they could barely even move their bodies when they felt that terrible power. Everyone's eyes were filled with horror. The turbulent wind blew the small house down, but Mu stood still, completely untouched as Mo had enveloped her in a force that was protecting her. In the 2639th world, Yang Kai managed to repel the attacking black ink disciples together with Mu's shadow, but not without difficulty. Just as he was about to use the profound source gate to suppress and seal Mo's source piece, the seal opened by itself before he could even act, and the piece inside turned into a black light that rushed into the sky, disappearing in the blink of an eye. This? Yang Kai looked on in astonishment at what had just happened. Mu's shadow paled and she raised her hand, pressing her palm against Yang Kai's chest before urging, "He has woken up. Quickly go to the primordial world, that is the source of my power. Find the shadow I left there and she will tell you what to do. Mo has awakened." Despite knowing that this would happen, Yang Kai could not help but feel his chest tightening when the time finally came. Was it finally time to face the strongest existence in this universe? Yang Kai then silently comforted himself. Somewhere between 30% and 40% of Mo's source should be suppressed and sealed, so in other words, its black ink strength had also been weakened by that much. Even so, was there anyone among them who could be a match for Mo? If there was no way to defeat Mo, then all their previous efforts would be in vain. It was too late to ask any more questions though, so under the pull of Mu's power, he disappeared in a flash of light. By this time, the battle outside the primordial heaven's source grand restriction had subsided. Zhang Ruoshi had arrived, bringing with her not only the 8th Ninth Order Small Stone Race personal guard, but also a large army of hundreds of millions from the Small Stone Race soldiers. The Black Ink clan at the opening of the grand restriction no longer dared to come out to fight, so how could the ones left outside be any match for the humans? The Small Stone Race regiments cut through the battlefield one by one, firstly dividing the Black Ink clan army before gradually pecking away at their forces. With the two giant spirit gods rampaging through the battlefield, the Black Ink clan army was soon decimated. If this were the past, then the Black Ink clan army might have fled if they were being so steeply suppressed. But this place was the primordial heaven source grand restriction, where the source of the Black Ink clan was, so where could they flee to? If they fought with their lives on the line, they could at least weaken the enemy and take some pressure off those still inside the grand restriction. With this consideration in mind, the only end for those outside the grand restriction was death. The human race soldiers who were still recuperating watched this scene from afar with mixed feelings. What should have been a certain defeat had been turned around by the Small Stone Race army. But this victory did not dictate the final outcome. It may take an even more grueling and brutal battle to actually win this war. Gotcha! Suddenly, a strange sound came from the void. Before the human race masters could figure out what was happening, they heard Wu Kuang's grave voice call out, "Watch out! The grand restriction is about to break." Gotcha! The sound began to overlap more and more. The human race army stopped for a moment before immediately getting into formation. As countless pairs of eyes watched on, cracks appeared in the endless darkness of the void, the lines becoming as dense as a spider web in the blink of an eye. A figure had also emerged from somewhere in the grand restriction, hurriedly moving towards the human race army. It was Wu Kuang, who had been standing guard at the grand restriction for thousands of years. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5978. The Way Forward. As the primordial heaven source grand restriction was about to break, it was pointless for Wu Kuang to stay connected to it any longer. In fact, he would even have to suffer the backlash if he remained. So, the moment he realized that the situation was irreversible, he left the grand restriction as soon as possible. With this, he could at least ensure that he would not be injured. As for Yang Kai, who still remained inside, he was no longer able to provide much help to him regardless. What caught the attention of the many Ninth Order Masters, however, was the aura that Wu Kuang was displaying at this moment. Wu Kuang's existence was known only to a few human race masters. They knew that he was sent here by Yang Kai to guard the primordial heaven source grand restriction, but no one knows how strong he was, not even Yang Kai. After all, when he sent Wukong here, he was only in the 7th Order Open Heaven realm. Even though he later broke through to the 8th Order and then the 9th Order, no one had any close contact with him, so they could only speculate on his strength. At this moment, Wukong's strength was finally revealed to the world. He was at the peak of the 9th Order. He was even stronger when compared to Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing, the oldest veteran masters of the human race. In the situation they were facing, having another peak 9th Order master would be of great help. However, something unexpected happened before the humans could even rejoice. Wukong's departure from the Grand Restrictions sped up its destruction. Even more cracks appeared, and soon, the primordial heaven's source Grand Restriction, which had persisted for millions of years, shattered like a broken mirror. Glowing dots of light filled the void, and as the light dissipated, boundless black filled one's vision. The blackness seemed to possess a life of its own, writhing and rolling as the auras of an uncountable number of beings could be felt inside of it. Before the Grand Restriction broke, the Black Ink clan could only leave through that one opening, so even at the height of the Human Crusade Forces crisis, not too many Black Ink clan reinforcements could get out at once. This allowed them to maintain a degree of control over the situation. But now things have changed. With the complete destruction of the Grand Restriction, all of the Black Ink clansmen hiding inside of it were instantly released. No one had any idea just how many Black Ink clansmen were still hidden in that abyss of darkness. The only thing that the humans could feel glad about was the fact that they had killed many of the Black Ink clan masters before, which relieved some of the pressure they had to face at this moment. The human race army waited with bated breath, but to their surprise, not a single Black Ink clansman emerged from the sea of Black Ink strength even after some time had passed. They seemed to be fearful of something. Soon, the human race masters realized what it was. It was Zhang Ruoxi that the Black Ink clan was afraid of. The power she had shown earlier was beyond comprehension, surpassing even that of the giant spirit gods, allowing her to kill royal lords like she was cutting melons or chopping vegetables. At the moment, Zhang Ruoxi stood at the very forefront of the small stone race army. Despite standing alone, her presence was still intimidating enough that the Black Ink clan did not dare to move rashly. Even though the white wings spread behind her back were small in the face of the darkness that covered everything the eye could see, the light emitting from her was far too bright for any darkness to truly cover. The 9th Order masters could not help but feel a little embarrassed at this. If Zhang Ruoxi had not soared across the skies to their aid, their second crusade would have already failed. If that were to be the case, then they would have no choice but to retreat through the path that Yang Kai had prepared for them, to follow him to seek a new life in a new world. But who would know what that new world would be like? In front of the massive enemy army, Zhang Ruoxi remained calm and steady. On the other hand, in the void before her, the Black Ink strength surged. The Black Ink clan were too terrified to even move. The power of a single person could actually be so terrifying. All of a sudden, Zhang Ruoxi's expression changed. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she stared into the depths of the black abyss. Seemingly noticing something, her wings flapped behind her and she turned into a stream of white light, instantly disappearing into the sea of darkness. From afar, a voice reached Mi Jingluan's ears. "Sir's inside, I'll go and check on him." In an instant, the Black Ink Ocean became even more agitated. It was clear that Zhang Ruoxi was not merely going over to check out the situation. Inside the void that was filled with all the Black Ink clansmen, she couldn't reach Yang Kai without cutting a bloody path through them. In the primordial world, the aftermath of the chaos in Dawn City was still lingering. Just now, everyone saw a figure at the edge of the city soaring into the skies before disappearing without a trace. And after that person disappeared, the black lights that fell from the sky also disappeared. Even though the unusual phenomenon was gone, the panic it caused would not ease for some time. The Saintess and Li Fei Yu looked in that direction together, a pondering look in their eyes. They knew that the first Saintess lived in seclusion at that location, and they had a sneaking suspicion that what they saw was related to her. Shortly after Mo departed, Yang Kai returned to this place, drawn by the power of Mu's shadow. The first thing he saw was Mu, who was standing in front of the small house. "Senior!" Yang Kai shouted. Mu turned to look in his direction, seemingly expecting him. "You're here. Where's little 11th? Yang Kai looked around, though he had a vague guess when he did not see his small figure around. "Sure enough," Mu replied. "He has awakened, and the sealed source pieces have all returned one after the other. This universe world cannot withstand his power, but he was unwilling to destroy it, so he has left my space-time river already." Yang Kai nodded lightly. "I understand." The final battle was upon him, and he had done all that he could. Whether they won or lost would depend on the final fight. Senior, since Mo has awakened, it is time for me to go. The power that the human race has at this time may not be enough to hold him back, but we will do our best. The last shadow of yours I met told me to come back and see you, and that you would show me the way forward, so I hope that Senior can enlighten me. You have already found your way forward. Mu looked at him with a smile in her gaze. Huh. Xueqi did not understand. You've chosen the same path that I have, Mu added. Xueqi was thoughtful. Condensing 10,000 grandaos in one's own body and manifesting the space-time river? Mu nodded lightly. As I told you before, everyone has their own space-time river, which starts flowing from the day they are born and ends at the day they die. However, since the start of time, few have been able to manifest their space-time river. I was the first, while you are the second. Saying so, she suddenly asked Xueqi a question. The open heaven realm method cultivated by the human race is flawed. You must have noticed, yes? Xueqi nodded. The ninth order is the limit of the open heaven realm method, but I had a vague feeling that the ninth order open heaven realm is not the end of martial Tao. There should be a higher realm above the ninth order, above the open heaven realm. There is indeed a higher realm above the ninth order. Mu gave him an affirmative answer. Xueqi was astonished. Has Senior reached it? Embarrassedly, Mu shook her head. If I had reached it, the human race would not be in this predicament today. Even though I have not reached it, I did touch upon it. Xueqi could not help but praise her in his heart, as expected of the strongest among the martial ancestors. Song told him back then that the martial ancestors were still only in the ninth order, but they were stronger as they had gone further along the path. It was just that they had still yet to leave the bounds of the open heaven realm. However, Mu told him today that she had touched the profound realm above the open heaven realm. Even if she had only touched it and not reached it, it was still an extraordinary achievement. Mu recalled an old memory and slowly began. The open heaven realm method was born out of necessity at a time when the human race was in a difficult situation. The early ancient era great monsters were rampaging throughout the universe, and without the open heaven realm method, the human race would have been nothing but food and slaves for them. During that time, the heavens were quietly beginning to favor the human race, so it devised a way out for them, the open heaven realm method. Only with it can the human race give rise to a constant stream of masters, which gave them the capital to contend with the early ancient era great monsters. However, even the heavens have their selfishness. For example, the primordial world. Once one's cultivation surpasses the immortal ascension realm, they would receive its repulsion and hostility. That is the selfishness of the primordial world. One can also see it as its instinct for self-preservation. The universe is not unchanging as its blessings were first concentrated on the divine spirits before moving to the early ancient era monster race, then finally to us, the human race. Over time, the three races became the favored of the heavens and were given the right to dominate all beneath it. She turned to Xueqi. Why do you think this happened? Xueqi pondered for a moment. If one race becomes too powerful, then they are no longer fearful of the heavens, and once the power they hold becomes strong enough to oppose it, it creates a sense of crisis in the heavens. Hence, there will be a transfer of its blessing. He had considered such a thing before, so he was able to give a quick answer to Mu's question. Mu nodded. Precisely. The universe lives, and it has its own will. Principles are a part of its will, but it is not the same as us living beings. It is above us as all beings are under its will. If any power that surpasses its control were to come to be, it would move to remedy the situation, but it does not take action itself, and it certainly does not have the power to do so. So, it uses the power of other beings to restore order from chaos and ensure that everything remains on the predetermined path. This is reflected in history from long ago, when the early ancient era monster race overthrew the divine spirits, and when the human race freed itself from the slavery of the early ancient era monster race. But Senior, what does this have to do with my path? Xueqi looked perplexed. Mu continued, naturally it is all related. Because the open heaven realm method was a gift willed by the heavens, it is also a kind of shackle. It is impossible to break free from these shackles of the open heaven realm method by using the open heaven realm method. In fact, there is only one place in existence that the heavens will cannot cover, and everything that happens and is obtained there is not under the control of the heavens. Xueqi's eyes lit up and he blurted out, the universe furnace. He could just about understand what Mu was getting at now. I've never understood what the universe furnace is, but it is definitely a place beyond the heavens' influence, Mu asserted. Yang Kai thought to himself, of course the heavens can't interfere with it, because the universe itself was created inside the universe furnace. It could even be considered the origin of the heavens. He had coincidentally seen the true face of the universe furnace and witnessed the process of it taking in chaos and splitting heaven and earth apart. He wanted to discuss all this with Mu, but time was running out and he could not figure out a way to explain everything in a timely manner, so he had no choice but to endure the urge for now. You and I have ventured into the universe furnace, and we have seen the infinite river that flows through it, which led to us condensing our own space-time rivers. Mu turned to Yang Kai. The space-time river is your path forward. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5979. Final Gift. The space-time river is my path forward. Yang Kai pondered. Senior means to say, the reason why I have placed a barrier outside of my space-time river is because I knew no one other than those who have also condensed their own space-time river have the power to save the universe. For those who do not have that ability, it would not benefit them in any way even if they found my space-time river. Since that is so, it would be better to cut off the hope for those who approach sooner to avoid them having to go through even greater despair later. Mu had hidden her space-time river in the primordial heaven's source grand restriction, and when Yang Kai was brought to it under Wu Kuang's lead, he felt something blocking him when he tried to enter. However, he was able to pass through easily. He thought at first that it was because of his identity as a human, but it was only later that he discovered this was because he had also condensed his space-time river. If not for that, no other human would have been able to enter this place, not even if they were in the ninth order. To the humans of the primordial world, the so-called Holy Sun was the savior of this world, but the savior that Mu spoke of was someone who could save the 3,000 worlds. To defeat Mo, the strength of the ninth order open heaven realm alone is not enough. Mo can only be defeated when someone who can break through the shackles of the ninth order and reach the next realm, a realm which I was only a step away from reaching. Yang Kai hurriedly asked, so what is the next realm? Why was Senior unable to make that breakthrough? Mu laughed bitterly before looking at him. As for what exactly the next realm is, even I am not sure. But as for why I did not manage to reach it, it is because my space-time river is incomplete. Yang Kai could not help but become lost in thought, recalling the wide and beautiful river that he saw before. Even that massive river is incomplete? Then what should a complete space-time river look like? In the first place, what makes hers incomplete? And what sort of problem did she encounter for her space-time river to remain incomplete? Is there no way to fix it? Yang Kai asked. Logically speaking, the space-time river was a condensation and manifestation of one's comprehension of 10,000 Tao strengths. Even if it were to be damaged in the midst of an intense battle, there should be a chance for it to recover as long as the foundations of one's grand Taos remained. The only possibility that would lead to the complete inability for the space-time river to be recovered was if the foundation of one's grand Taos got destroyed. Mu shook her head. It is not possible to fix. Long past memories tumbled around in her mind, leading her to recall the events of that day, and the corners of her mouth could not help but lift up into a smile. When the profound source gate cut off a section of her space-time river, she did not think much of it then. She was immersed in her joy of finally rescuing Mo from behind that closed gate. She originally thought that she only needed to open the door again to retrieve that part of her space-time river. Who could have expected that when she did open the profound source gate, that there would be nothing behind it, only an endless pool of desolation and darkness. But even then, she had not realized the severity of the problem. Not until her space-time river continued to grow and her cultivation became more robust. When she tried to break through to the next realm, it was then that she helplessly realized that the damage to her space-time river had cut off all her hopes of taking that final step. If that incident had not happened back then, she should have already broken through the confines of the open heaven realm and reached that mysterious realm. Did she regret it? Not once. She only blamed herself for not teaching Mo properly when she saved him from the profound source gate. By the time she found out about what happened later, the situation was already too far gone to be salvaged. And compared to that, it was not as if she was completely without any harvests. If the profound source gate had not devoured a part of her space-time river, she would not have been able to refine it so easily. It was one of the most profound innate supreme treasures, after all. As she dispelled the memories from her mind, Mu withdrew her smile and looked seriously at Yang Kai. You have already set foot on the path, and you will reach the end point sooner or later where you will have to open up the new way forward, but not much time is left for you now. I hope that you can achieve what I failed to back then. At once, the pressure that Yang Kai felt weighing on him was like a mountain, but he still gave a firm answer, "Junior will try his best." Mu smiled and walked up to him. Just like the other shadows that Yang Kai encountered in the many universe worlds, she gently pressed her hand to his chest. "Go, put an end to it all. The human race has suffered since the late ancient era until now. As the favored children of heaven, it is time for us to have our own peaceful world to live in." The reason why Yang Kai came back here was because the previous shadow had sent him here, but after talking for so long, Yang Kai still did not get a clear answer from Mu. What did he have to do in order to defeat the current MO? Mu did tell him that he had to make a breakthrough to the next realm, but he had not even reached the door to the next realm yet. How could he make a quick breakthrough at such an urgent time? Mu continued to smile at him as her figure gradually started to fade. "I left you something. You will find out what to do soon enough." As she disappeared, Yang Kai's body rose involuntarily into the sky and soon plunged into the vast and beautiful space-time river. This time, however, he did not feel anything pulling him. He had traveled across about 90% of the 3,000 universe worlds in order to suppress and seal the pieces of Mo's source, and he had succeeded in sealing more than 1,000 of them. Right now, Mo had already awoken. The source pieces that Yang Kai was not able to suppress and seal had returned to Mo, so there was no longer any point in visiting those universe worlds. Yang Kai's body bobbed up and down in the river as the currents inside of it stirred. Then, a strange feeling suddenly arose in him. That was, he felt an indescribable sense of affinity and recognition by the space-time river that should belong to Mu. What's more, it seemed as if he was able to mobilize its power. Yang Kai was astonished by this discovery. This was, after all, Mu's space-time river, the culmination of her lifelong cultivation. Even if Mu had departed from the world of the living long ago, even if he himself had his own space-time river, it did not make sense for him to feel this affinity and recognition from it. Scenes flashed before his eyes. Scenes of him in each universe world at the moment when he parted with Mu. Whether Yang Kai managed to seal the source pieces or not in each universe world, as long as Mu's shadow still existed, he had not failed to find her and bring her away with him because he was unwilling to see this senior who had fought alone for countless years continue to wait and suffer endlessly. The way he brought her away was through taking the last shreds of energy from her shadows into his own body. Each one was a moment in Mu's lifetime. Mu had divided Mo's source into 3,000 pieces, suppressing and sealing them in different universe worlds, and she had also separated herself into the same number of shadows in order to remain by the source piece's side. Every person had their own space-time river from the moment that they were born, and it ended at their last breath. Each shadow injected the last of their strength into Yang Kai's body, which was equivalent to granting Mu's existence, during the time used to conceive the shadow, to Yang Kai. During this long journey, the number of shadows that Yang Kai had encountered was over 2,000. In other words, out of Mu's many shadows, he had gained the recognition of at least 70% of them. Yang Kai finally understood what it was that Mu had left him. She had left him her own space-time river. With the approval and acknowledgement of most of its owner, Yang Kai could now refine her space-time river and use it for himself. This was Mu's last resort, as well as her final gift. A tidal wave of grief crashed over Yang Kai, overwhelming his entire being. However, he had no time for sorrow. Mo had awakened and escaped, so the human race was in danger of being annihilated at any moment. He had to receive Mu's gift as soon as possible and strengthen himself. However, Yang Kai was acutely aware that despite all of the hidden hands that Mu left behind, it was still not inexhaustible. She must not have thought about the problems with her own cultivation. Mu had gained enlightenment about her own space-time river at a point when she was no longer improving in her cultivation back then. But Yang Kai was different. He was merely at the peak of the 8th order when he trained inside of the universe furnace, before he even took the risk to use the 3-self source reconstitution art to break through to the 9th order. It was there where Yang Kai had condensed his own space-time river, long before reaching the peak of the 9th order. When the final war between the human race and Black Ink clan broke out at the No-Return Pass, the time left for Yang Kai to cultivate was cut short, and even if he did borrow the power of the 2 open heaven realm cradles and diligently cultivated with the help of his space-time river at every opportunity, there was still a considerable distance left between his current cultivation and the peak of the 9th order. The reason Mu gifted Yang Kai with her space-time river was most likely in hopes that Yang Kai could borrow its power in order to break through the shackles of the open heaven realm method and reach the mysterious next realm in one step. As long as he could reach that realm, defeating Mo would not be an issue. But right now, the situation was that Yang Kai's cultivation was still a great distance from the peak of the Ninth Order, and even if he did receive Mu's gift, it was impossible for him to make a breakthrough in such a short amount of time. Mu's gift would undoubtedly help boost the power of his Tao strengths greatly, but it could not help to grow his cultivation. Mu might have considered that, or she might not have. Regardless, she had already done all that she could. As one of the 10 martial ancestors, she had left absolutely everything she had behind for her juniors of the human race. After working out Mu's plans, Yang Kai calmed his mind and summoned his own space-time river directly inside of Mu's. If Mu's space-time river was like a coiling grand dragon, then Yang Kai's space-time river was like a little snake. At the very best it would be a big python. There was simply no contest. However, when Yang Kai's space-time river appeared, the water stirring fiercely around him began to gather around it and merged into it, increasing the size and volume of Yang Kai's space-time river. Yang Kai could not help but grunt as his mind felt dizzy from the phenomenon. He was almost overwhelmed by all of the mysterious sensations that were crashing down on him, as if to drown out his very being. The space-time river was a condensation of many Tao strengths with space-time Tao strength as its foundation, and the river's water was all a manifestation of those Tao strengths. With the recognition of Mu's many shadows, Yang Kai did not feel any resistance when he was refining her space-time river, but its mass was simply too great, a manifestation of Mu's great attainments and insights into all the grand Taos, and all of it was being stuffed into Yang Kai. A sense of crisis came over him at that instant. Yang Kai realized that if he failed to withstand the impact of these Tao strengths, something terrible would happen to him. Sylvan. So, overall, for Mu and Mo's story, Mu and Mo met beforehand. A piece of Mu's space-time river got caught behind the gate. Mo met the other 9 through Mu and they became close enough to be called Little 11th or Xueqi. While fighting the war, Mo tried to help out and corrupted his allies and enemies. The 10 found out that they fucked up and planned to seal it. Mu made a plan on how to do it. After the war, she would take Mo around and sightsee. Meanwhile, the other 9 would build the Grand Restriction. Once it was time, she led Mo inside and they trapped it. Mo, unhappy, started the Great War of that era in an attempt to free itself. I guess, during that time, the 10 agreed on this lie to say that they met Mo instead of Mu freeing Mo, else the other humans would target Mu in anger. Sometime later, war got pushed back to create the Spiritless Land. Mu went into the Grand Restriction. I believe she was trying to find the missing part of her space-time river. There, she found out that a part of Mo was still inside the gate. Doubt she was able to open the gate fully. But she found a better way to seal away its strength in hopes of defeating Mo anyways. She found out that she can't go above the open heaven realm. Since the space-time river is connected to one's life and death, she made the preparations to help the next guy get stronger. She had to kill herself. Else, the space-time river would not be able to split from her and be left behind. Well, that's how I made sense of the story so far. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5980. It's you. Yang Kai had a nagging feeling that if he failed to withstand the onslaught of Tao strengths washing over him right now, he would become part of the Tao strengths, and both space-time rivers would collapse. To be one with the Tao. A strange thought occurred to Yang Kai. This is an obstacle in the path of cultivation. All is well if I make it through, but if we don't, all is lost. So, this is the hurdle that must be faced when one reaches the pinnacle of the martial Tao. He quickly used the power of the soul-warming lotus to protect his consciousness. The situation improved ever so slightly, but the soul-warming lotus, which had been infallible in the past, could not be of any decisive help this time around. If one were to describe Mu's final gift as a feast, then the soul-warming lotus was stomach medicine. In the past, whenever Yang Kai's soul was threatened by outside forces, the soul-warming lotus would keep it well protected. It ensured that Yang Kai's soul did not get destroyed and his consciousness remained intact. However, that was not the case with Mu's gift. The Tao strengths within her space-time river were not poison. On the contrary, they were the greatest of supplements. The situation came down to whether Yang Kai could digest everything he had been given or not. The soul-warming lotus could not do much in this situation as it was Yang Kai who took the initiative to refine and absorb everything inside Mu's space-time river. It was up to him to take the many Tao strengths in for himself. Yang Kai's space-time river, which had been like a snake earlier, was rapidly expanding. As it grew bigger, its speed of devouring and refining increased as well. A sudden surge of pressure made Yang Kai's skin split apart and blood poured out at once. It was hard for him to withstand everything with his current strength. Not daring to hesitate for even a breath, a sonorous dragon roar rang out and a massive dragon manifested. Now that Yang Kai had assumed his dragon form, the burden on his body eased a lot. However, the shining golden light of the divine dragon looked different now. The concentrated Tao strength circled Yang Kai's dragon form in an attempt to transform him into Tao strengths, but his dragon scales tensed up to block the encroachment. Dragon roars kept ringing out inside the meandering space-time river. Meanwhile, outside the space-time river, Mo growled softly as his source pieces which had been suppressed and sealed in the past were returning to him. His power was increasing at an alarming rate. While Yang Kai was struggling with himself, Mo calmly observed the situation occurring inside the space-time river. The source pieces he regained were the ones that had been taken away from him in the past, so he was simply reabsorbing them now. Still, he had not fully regained everything yet. Instead of hatred or resentment though, Mo merely had a complicated look on his face. Just as he had said in his final conversation with Mu, although his mere existence brought harm, since he had gained sentience, he had the right to fight to survive. It was not fair for him to be locked behind a door forever. Black ink strength was the root of his existence, and his consciousness had simply emerged from it. Even without Mo, something else that was similar would have come out of the darkness eventually. "I should thank you," Mo murmured as he cupped his fist lightly, reabsorbing all of the remaining source pieces. In the past, he could barely control his own strength as it had grown beyond his ability to manipulate. However, Yang Kai's earlier efforts had sealed over 30% of his source strength behind the profound source gate. Although this weakened Mo's maximum strength, it came with the silver lining of granting him far better control of what strength remained. Thus, in Mo's current state, he was even more threatening than when he was at the peak of his power. He raised his hand and made a grabbing motion directed at the river as he snarled, "Come out." He did not want anyone to touch what Mu left behind. Previously, to protect the primordial world from destruction, Mo even voluntarily left the primordial world and jumped out of the space-time river as he feared that his overwhelming strength would destroy it. The space-time river was the final piece of Mu that remained. A dragon roar escaped from the space-time river. Yang Kai, who was busy refining the Tao strengths, suddenly felt something grabbing onto him to drag him out of the river. He did not sense Mo's presence, but he was certain it was the latter's doing. All along, Yang Kai had been curious to know the extent of Mo's power, about what the legendary creation realm was like. At last, Yang Kai personally experienced just how terrifying Mo's might was. Mo's strength remained this immense despite the two of them being separated by two space-time rivers. Without the space-time rivers, Yang Kai estimated that he, a ninth-order master and a divine dragon, would not be able to withstand more than 3 of Mo's attacks before he perished. "I can't let him drag me out." There was a chance for him to put up a fight if he remained hidden inside Mu's space-time river, but if he did get pulled out, he was doomed to die. Yang Kai knew what he had to do, and with a roar, he began harnessing the strength of the space-time rivers in a frenzied manner to attempt to cut off the force that was constraining him. Even though the force came from outside the rivers, it could not be cut off so easily. Furthermore, Yang Kai could not wield his full strength in his present condition. His space-time river was busy refining the Tao strengths from Mu's river, and as the complex and mysterious mix of Tao strength surged, much of his focus was diverted to protecting his soul to avoid being refined into Tao strengths himself. Both parties had their reasons for holding back, so for the moment, it was a stalemate. Outside the river, Mo's eyes flashed with surprise. He did not think that Yang Kai would be able to put up a fight, but he doubled down and called out impatiently, "Come out on your own or else I don't mind heading in myself." Mo did not want to destroy the final memory he had of Mu. He knew that some shadows of Mu remained inside the space-time river, so he wanted to preserve them. If he entered the space-time river, he was undoubtedly going to inflict irreparable harm and the shadows could very well be destroyed. This was not an outcome he could accept. However, all Mo received in response was even more ferocious dragon roars that came from within the river. Mo's eyes flashed with displeasure. "How stubborn! I'm giving you one last chance. I can promise you that once this battle is over, I'll give the humans a great territory where they can carry on living free of the corruption from Black Ink's strength, which will never enter that great territory." This was the most it was willing to compromise. Mu was gone and the remaining humans no longer mattered to him. He was only willing to give the humans the space of a single great territory for their race to survive for the sake of protecting Mu's space-time river. In your dreams. The dragon roar exploded out of the space-time river. Through the restriction of the Tao strengths, Mo could vaguely see a pair of large golden eyes staring in its direction. Foolish impudence. Mo coldly snorted in response. He then took a step forward to enter the space-time river. However, as soon as he stepped into the river, the water surged and the power of all the Tao strengths rushed about to block his path. He had to pause outside the river instead. It looked as if Mo was stuck outside the river as endless waves crashed down upon him, but he was still slowly making his way forward. Mo could not be stopped. Yongkai's expression hardened. He had refined quite a lot of the Tao strengths from Mu's space-time river in a short span of time and strengthened his own space-time river greatly. He was even able to use a bit of the strength from Mu's river itself, but even so, it was not his strength, so he could not wield it freely. He had no way of keeping Mo out if the latter chose to force his way in. Soon Yongkai made up his mind. Since he could not keep Mo out, he was not going to even try. The space-time river was a mysterious place made up of the solidified Grand Daos with space-time Tao strength as its foundation. Even if Mo entered the river, it would not be easy for him to locate Yongkai. The only thing Yongkai could do now was to avoid Mo's attacks while doing his best to refine the river and strengthen himself. As long as he could grow powerful enough, he could put up a fight against Mo. Just as Yongkai prepared himself for this final gambit, Mo, who was busy pushing his way into the river, abruptly turned his head around and looked over his shoulder. He had sensed something strange. A brief moment later, a spark of white light appeared in the distance where countless masters from the Black Ink clan were stationed. The white light shrouded a figure which was traveling at astonishing speed. Everywhere this figure passed, all of the Black Ink clansmen turned into a sea of black blood, be they simple soldiers or royal lords. In just a flash, the white light arrived at the space-time river and Zhang Ruoxi's figure appeared. She looked around and immediately established the situation, her eyes flashing darkly as they fixed on Mo. When their eyes met, Mo froze in place. He did not expect a master like her to exist. Based on the information he had, the strongest humans were only the Ninth Order Masters, and even among their other allies, the strongest were merely giant spirit gods. Yet, the woman who just arrived had an aura that seemed even stronger than that of a giant spirit god. When Mo sensed the clean and pure strength of the new arrival, his expression suddenly contorted as he roared, "It's you!" He recognized the source of that strength. Zhang Ruoxi understood what Mo meant. When the burning light and serene glimmer's strength finally harmonized in the chaotic dead territory, the memories of her Heaven's Order bloodline began awakening, so she was not completely clueless about the events of the ancient past. Thus, when she heard what Mo said, she coolly replied, "Yes, and no. It is. It's you." Mo's expression had changed rather drastically. Even when Yongkai suppressed and sealed over 30% of his source, he took everything in stride and could even thank the latter. However, when Mo saw Zhang Ruoxi, the darkness hidden deep within him overtook everything else. He leapt out of the space-time river and murderously flew over to Zhang Ruoxi, but all of a sudden, he stopped and shook his head as he muttered, "No, that can't be." Black Ink strength continued to surge through him before he suddenly lifted his head and leveled a vicious glare at Zhang Ruoxi and bellowed, "No, it is you." Mo behaved as if he had lost his mind and he began to mumble and contradict himself, seemingly completely out of sorts. All of a sudden, he flashed forwards and reappeared in front of Zhang Ruoxi, sending his fist flying as he roared, "Why?" Martial Peak. Chapter 5981, Light and Darkness. When the gate formed, primordial light and primordial darkness came into existence. From then on, their paths differed entirely. The primordial light signified all that was good and wonderful in the universe, and as soon as it was born, it left and became the colors of everything in existence. On the other hand, the primordial darkness remained suppressed and sealed behind the gate. Time went on, and even when it developed its own consciousness, it could not escape. It was stuck in an endless sea of darkness and loneliness. Even the primordial darkness craved the light. If it had not been for Mu's pity and its own persistent efforts, it would still be suppressed and sealed inside the gate right now, with no hope of ever getting out. Why? We both came into existence together, so why did the primordial light get to leave while I, the darkness, had to remain in isolation? Mo sent his fist crashing down at Zhang Ruoxi, but his interrogative cry for an answer was not directed at her. It was directed at the heavenly way which had been so unfair. Zhang Ruoxi's Heaven's Order sword rose to block Mo's furious strike, which sent her flying away in a flash of white light. A mere breath later, she flew back and stood in front of Mo. Her brow furrowed as she studied him. She could sense that there was something amiss about Mo's present state. Just as Mo had previously said to Mu and the humans had made the right choice when they suppressed and sealed him inside the primordial heaven source grand restriction. As his power grew, his consciousness was barely able to control his own power. If Mu and the other humans had not suppressed and sealed him, everything would have already been wiped from existence. Yang Kai traversed across over 2,000 universe worlds and suppressed and sealed about a third of Mo's source strength. Although this weakened Mo's maximum power, it proved to be of great help to Mo as well, for he was now able to have full control over his strength. However, when Mo saw Zhang Ruoxi and sensed her power which entirely opposed its own, black ink strength consumed his mind. Light and darkness had always been opposing forms of existence. The separation of the gate was the only reason why both came into existence at the same time. Now that both of these opposing powers stood before each other, it turned into a battle that would not end until one was vanquished. Black ink strength surged and gathered into an endless sea that seemed to drown out the entire void before charging straight at Zhang Ruoxi and completely shrouding her. Zhang Ruoxi's wings flickered behind her as her Heaven's Order sword lightly tapped the spot at her feet. All at once, light burst forth and vanquished the spreading darkness. However, Mo seized this chance to draw nearer, swinging both his fists down at Zhang Ruoxi. She blocked with her sword but was once again sent tumbling. After her many years of hard cultivation back in the chaotic dead territory, her power had grown by leaps and bounds thanks to her Heaven's Order bloodline as well as the power of the sun's burning light and moon's serene glimmer. In terms of pure prowess alone, she was stronger than a giant spirit god and no royal lord could withstand more than 3 attacks from her. That being said, now that she was up against Mo's frenzied attacks, she was at a complete disadvantage and could not even hold her ground against him. The primordial light had left as soon as it came into existence. It then split the power of yin and yang from itself. Afterwards, it crashed into what would become the divine spirit ancestral land and brought forth the many divine spirits and a human woman who possessed the Heaven's Order bloodline. If Zhang Ruoxi could have gathered the pure power of yin and yang, and all of the divine spirits, then with the help of the Heaven's Order bloodline, she could have brought forth the full power of the primordial light once more. Alas, too many divine spirits had perished, and the surviving ones numbered far too few in comparison to their peak. Even if Zhang Ruoxi wanted to try and bring forth the true power of the primordial light, there was no way for her to accomplish that. In other words, the strength she possessed now was incomplete. However, black ink strength was incomplete as well. Zhang Ruoxi could sense the many gaps in Mo's source. Nevertheless, even in this state, Mo was still the one with the upper hand as he had continued to grow stronger over millions of years. After just a brief exchange, Zhang Ruoxi knew full well that she was not Mo's equal. She could only hold out for another half-hour or so before she would be defeated. And from the ruthless, murderous look on Mo's face right now, if she were to be defeated, death was the only outcome that awaited her. She had no choice. Zhang Ruoxi let out a soft sigh, and after blocking yet another one of Mo's attacks, she raised her hand and made a grabbing motion as she cried out, "Come!" A devastating battle had broken out outside the primordial heaven's source grand restriction. When Zhang Ruoxi was around, her strength alone had been enough to deter the Black Ink clan, making them fearfully hide in the darkness. However, once she left, the Black Ink clan sensed that their Supreme One had regained its power, so they jumped into action. They emerged from the darkness and challenged the small stone race army. All at once, brutal fights exploded across the void. The small stone race army numbered in the hundreds of millions, but the Black Ink clan army that emerged from the endless darkness far surpassed even that. This was the result of Mo's accumulation over millions of years, so it was impossible to imagine just how many masters from the Black Ink clan there were right now. There was no lack of royal lords either. Faced with such a massive army, the human race army, which only numbered a couple tens of millions, was nothing more than a drop in the ocean. It was only now that the humans realized just how ridiculous their crusade was. If the human race had to face off against that many masters from the Black Ink clan alone, they had no chance of winning. Thankfully, Zhang Ruoxi brought the small stone race army with her. Hundreds of millions of small stone race soldiers bore the brunt of the battle, so the humans had a fighting chance. Though the human race army was far smaller in number, It consisted entirely of elite masters whose strength could not be underestimated. Under Mi Jingluan's command, the human army moved in an organized fashion to attack the Black Ink clan and grind down their power. If someone from the Black Ink clan was targeted by the humans, their fate was sealed as they had no means of escaping. The humans had grown stronger too and had dozens of Ninth Order masters among their ranks. Furthermore, Wu Kuang no longer needed to control the primordial heaven source grand restriction, and thus, the terror of the heaven-devouring battle law was unleashed for all to see. Relying on the heritage of a peak Ninth Order master, Wu Kuang weaved through the Black Ink clan army alone and killed all in his path. Even the royal lords could not stop him. The situation with the two giant spirit gods had changed as well. At the start of the battle, they had to guard the opening at the primordial heaven source grand restriction, and had been besieged by swarms of royal lords as a result. Now that the primordial heaven source grand restriction was no more, they were no longer pinned down. Nothing held Ada and Air back anymore, so they worked together to rampage through the Black Ink clan army. Everywhere they went, they crushed the enemy in their path. Furthermore, there were also the 8 Ninth Order small stone race masters. These 8 were scattered across the Black Ink clan army as they slaughtered their opponents. Though it looked as if they were fighting separately, their auras remained connected in a battle formation that could bolster the strength of any one of them at any moment. Some of the more arrogant royal lords had suffered due to ignorance and died from a single blow from them as a result. Even though the royal lords might be as powerful as the Ninth Order small stone race masters, their opponent could borrow the strength of their fellow masters at any time, completely blindsiding the royal lords. In this, the fiercest battle to have ever taken place in human history, huge swaths of soldiers from the small stone race and Black Ink clan died every second. The divine spirits who received the Great Sun and Great Moon marks from Yang Kai weaved through the battlefield to wield the power of the two marks. Each time they did so, yellow and blue light would shoot out from the rocks left behind by the fallen small stone race members. The two lights merged and turned into dazzling purifying light that killed scores of the Black Ink clan army. At the same time, it cleared the Black Ink strength left behind by the deaths of the Black Ink clansmen, thus changing the environment of the battlefield. The human race army kept snaking their way around the battlefield without ever coming to a stop, as they would be surrounded by the Black Ink clan if they did. The situation was dire and fraught with tension. Even an old veteran like Mi Jingluan could not predict how this battle would ultimately go. The armies on both sides were too great in numbers. The battle had to proceed for some time before the chances of victory grew clearer. The human race and the small stone race armies simply had to work together to persistently slaughter their enemy and fight to emerge victorious. Everyone knew that this was the final battle. If they won, peace would return to all the lands, but if they lost, the humans had come to terms with the outcome of a defeat. All they could do now was give their all for one last time. Even though the humans focused on the outskirts of the battlefield, they were still under a lot of pressure. Now and then, the Black Ink clan army would try to cut them off, and they would have to carve out a path for themselves through blood and slaughter. One after another, numerous warships exploded and the human race masters died alongside them. Amidst this battlefield, even the divine spirits were at risk of peril. A clear phoenix cry echoed through the void as the 30 or so different colored phoenixes transformed into their true forms and spread their wings. They were the only remaining clansmen of the Phoenix clan. The Phoenix clansmen were carefully guarding the giant parasol tree in their center, their sacred treasure. They had not used their sacred treasure in any of their precious battles, as it was the foundation of their existence. All of the Phoenix clan came from the immortal parasol tree. However, this was the final battle, so the Phoenix clan no longer held back. A white phoenix, together with its clansmen, sat on the parasol tree and wielded the power of the sacred treasure, causing space to twist and contort. The contortions circled the human race army, and as the space rippled, the humans vanished. At the very next breath, the human race army emerged in a completely different part of the battlefield where the situation was dire. The small stone race army's defense lines were on the verge of breaking. However, the Black Ink clan had been caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the human race army, and soon, the situation stabilized as the Black Ink clan suffered heavy casualties. Once again, space rippled. With the help of the power of the Phoenix clan and the immortal parasol tree, the human race army shuttled the void to different parts of the battlefield to stop the Black Ink clan's frenzied attempts to break through the front lines. Nevertheless, the Phoenix clan's aid could not be sustained forever. After numerous uses of their strength, they could no longer maintain their true forms and reverted back to their human forms. The immortal parasol tree then weakened and dimmed. Without the blessing of the immortal parasol tree, the humans lost their ability to freely traverse the battlefield. Worse, what they had done earlier drew the attention of countless masters from the Black Ink clan. And now, the Black Ink clan charged at the humans in a bid to seek vengeance by wiping them out for good. Dragon roars then rang out as the Dragon clan combined their strength and summoned the Crystal Palace. Similarly, numerous sacred treasures were summoned across the battlefield. These were the foundation of the various divine spirit clans, and every single one of them had gone through countless years of accumulation and refinement. The divine spirits would not summon them unless their very existence was threatened. Martial Peak. Chapter 5982. 9 Palaces Formation. The divine spirits harnessed the power of their sacred treasures to aid the human race army in the fight to slaughter their common enemy. There were also 2 giant spirit gods and 8 ninth-order small stone race masters thundering across the battlefield. Meanwhile, the small stone race army, which numbered hundreds of millions, staunchly held the front lines. As a result, compared to the small stone race and the humans, the Black Ink clan suffered far greater casualties on the battlefield. At some point, the human race masters began to see glimmers of hope for a victorious outcome. Alas, their hopes were soon dashed. The 8 ninth-order small stone race masters who had been busy exterminating the enemy seemed to have been summoned by someone. With their aura connected, they charged through the Black Ink clan army and headed deep within the darkness. Soon, they disappeared from sight. No one knew where they went exactly. However, Zhang Ruoxi had gone off in that direction earlier, and terrifying shockwaves were now rippling out from that area. Atop the tattered Puryong Pass, Mi Jingluan's heart sank as he realized that Zhang Ruoxi must have encountered some kind of trouble. Based on the strength Zhang Ruoxi exhibited earlier, the only threat against her had to be Mo. The primordial heaven's source ground restriction had been destroyed and Mo had awakened. Thus, the battle reached its final, most critical climax. The departure of the 8 ninth-order small stone races greatly eased the pressure on the Black Ink clan. The 8 of them had focused on killing off territory lords and royal lords, with many of the latter suffering or even dying to the targeted attacks. Now that the 9th-order small stone race masters left the battlefield, there were only the 2 giant spirit gods remaining, and Ada and Aer could not kill off the royal lords as swiftly as the 8 9th-order small stone race masters. In the end, size was the deciding factor. Naturally, the 9th-order small stone race masters were weaker than the giant spirit gods, but they were the same size as humans and could move around deftly. Any royal lord they had their eyes on could not escape from them. The same could not be said for the giant spirit gods. They were too massive, and though their strength was unparalleled, they were not nearly as nimble or flexible. Each time they attacked, large swaths of the Black Ink clansmen would die, but those who reacted in time could still escape. Thus, now that the 8 ninth-order small stone race masters left the battlefield, the royal lords were a lot less hindered and could do much more, such as grouping up to besiege the human race army. The Black Ink clan realized that even though the small stone race army made up the majority on the battlefield, the humans were the true driving force behind the battle. Furthermore, compared to the hundreds of millions of small stone race soldiers, it was easier to wipe out the humans, who only numbered in the tens of millions. As long as they killed off all the humans, they would emerge victorious, regardless of the casualties they suffered. All at once, the human race army was under great pressure as they became the primary targets of the Black Ink clan. Deep inside the void, the intense battle between Zhang Ruoxi and Mo continued. It was the first time that the primordial light and darkness were together again since the dawn of creation, and as they clashed, the universe seemed to shatter and break. Mo seemed to have lost all reason as the fury that built up throughout all the eons poured out at once, leaving Zhang Ruoxi with barely any room to fight back. From a distance, the light and darkness could be seen clashing, with the ocean of darkness keeping the light completely surrounded. Only a feeble flicker of light could be seen coming from the center of the conflict. Darkness was constantly clawing at the light, and it looked as if the latter would be extinguished at any moment. Despite having over 30% of his source suppressed and sealed, Mo's might was still immeasurable and impossible to imagine. At the very least, he was more than what Zhang Ruoxi could handle. Earlier on, she estimated that she could hold out for half an hour, but now that they were well and truly engaged, she realized she had underestimated her opponent. The power of the primordial light had been dispersed, much of it disappearing with the death of the divine spirits. All that was left were the Heaven's Order bloodline and the power of the Yin and Yang. Therefore, the primordial light had lost even more of its strength than Mo. As the fight went on, Mo grew fiercer. Black Ink's strength surged and it looked as if he was on the verge of completely devouring Zhang Ruoxi. Zhang Ruoxi was at a great disadvantage, and her situation only eased once she summoned the 8 Ninth Order Small Stone Race Masters over. They left the main battlefield and swiftly headed straight over to Zhang Ruoxi. From a distance, their connected auras linked up with Zhang Ruoxi's, and a battle formation was instantly formed. Previously, the 8 trigrams formation formed by the 8 Ninth Order Small Stone Race Masters had stunned the human race masters, but if they saw what was happening now, they would have no words to describe their shock and awe. Zhang Ruoxi and the 8 Ninth Order Small Stone Race Masters formed a 9 Palaces formation, the most powerful of all battle formations. Zhang Ruoxi acted as the core while the 8 Ninth Order Small Stone Race Masters formed the base. All at once, Ruoxi's power soared and she was no longer cornered without any means of fighting back. The flash of light expanded amid the darkness and broke free of its restraints. It now had the power to fight back and cover a greater area in brightness. Mo sensed this change and grew even more furious, unleashing even more concentrated black ink strength from his body. The two continued to clash, and each time light and darkness collided, darkness would spread out behind Mo, while light and the 8 Ninth Order Small Stone Race Masters followed closely behind Zhang Ruoxi. Time and time again, the two smashed against each other, neither side showing any signs of backing down. With each clash, the void crumbled and shattered. A battle of such immense power had never occurred before, and it would never occur again. This was a battle between the primordial forces of existence. The intense fight went on for hours, with no side able to overwhelm the other. With the help of the battle formation with her small stone race personal guard, Zhang Ruoxi could finally oppose Mo on even footing. Nevertheless, this was merely a battle formation and not her own strength. The prolonged fight not only continued to add to the pressure that Zhang Ruoxi faced, but even the 9th Order Small Stone Race Masters were struggling. The 9th Order Small Stone Race Masters had tough bodies, weaker than Yang Kai's divine dragon physique, but not by much. Under normal circumstances, they would not be facing any issues. However, the long and intense fight proved to be a burden that was slowly exceeding their ability to bear. Cracks began to appear on the bodies of the 9th Order Small Stone Race Masters, and as Zhang Ruoxi and Mo continued to clash, these cracks grew. Soon, the cracks weaved across their bodies like spider webs. It could be seen that once the cracks reached a certain point, even the 9th Order Small Stone Race Masters would crumble into a pile of rocks. These small stone races were Ruoxi's personal guard. They had been groomed with great difficulty and were intrinsically connected to her, so she could sense the state of every single one of them. Therefore, when she picked up on their injuries, she realized that things were looking bad for them. She was only able to fight Mo because she had formed a battle formation with her small stone race personal guard. But if something happened to the latter, the battle formation would collapse, even if only one of them died. Once that happened, it would be impossible for her to hold her own against Mo. Once this thought occurred to her, Zhang Ruoxi changed her strategy. Instead of confronting Mo head-on, she took a defensive stance to drag the fight out. She did not know what her sir was doing now, but all along, she knew that he was capable of doing things no one else could, and she held strongly to this belief. Sir can always make a miracle happen even in a hopeless situation. Therefore, regardless of what he was doing now, she had to try and buy him enough time. Her new strategy worked. When two opponents were evenly matched, one could not accomplish much if the other was determined to prolong the fight. The intense fight turned into a chase instead. Ruoxi and her 8 small stone race personal guard kept flitting about, and even though Mo wielded his immense power wildly, he could not pin down and suppress her. Mo, who had already lost his senses, became even more incensed, releasing bestial snarls and roars in an unending cacophony. When Mo first emerged from the space-time river, he looked no different from a regular human, apart from his black ink strength. However, when Zhang Ruoxi showed up, the black ink strength surged and overtook his mind. At this point, Mo no longer looked human. Ruoxi's appearance and subsequent actions seemed to have driven him mad. All of a sudden, Mo stopped chasing Zhang Ruoxi. As Zhang Ruoxi puzzled over this, Mo abruptly turned around and charged towards the space-time river. Ruoxi's expression stiffened. Although Mo had been so agitated that he lost his senses, his battle instincts remained. Since Zhang Ruoxi was equal in strength to him, he could not get rid of her, so he changed his target to Yang Kai, who was still within the space-time river. Even in his blurry state, he was still determined to protect the space-time river. He was not going to let anyone touch the final trace of Mu. Upon seeing that Mo was turning back, Zhang Ruoxi swiftly chased after him. Light flashed as she stopped him and engaged in a frontal battle again. After a brief skirmish, Ruoxi repeated her old tactic and quickly retreated. This led to a furious Mo pursuing her in the opposite direction of the space-time river. Mo kept up the chase for a while, but when his efforts proved fruitless, he turned around again. Once again, Ruoxi caught up to him. By doing this over and over again, she managed to occupy Mo's attention. Nonetheless, Zhang Ruoxi knew this was only a temporary measure. She could tell that Mo was not in the right state of mind at the moment, which was why he did not notice what she was doing with her fairly crude strategy. However, with each clash, the power of the light would wipe out some of the darkness, and similarly, the darkness would devour the light. In other words, both light and darkness were weakening each other each time they collided. Zhang Ruoxi could clearly sense that she was greatly weakened by the many hours of fighting, and the same was true of Mo. Once the black ink strength was weakened to a certain extent, Mo would most likely regain his senses, and when that time came, she would no longer be able to use this strategy to keep him occupied. Furthermore, Ruoxi was even more worried by the fact that the 8 Ninth Order Small Stone Race Masters would not be able to hold out much longer. Their bodies were covered in cracks now, and it looked as if they would crumble at the slightest touch. She was doing her best to keep the head-on confrontations with Mo to a minimum, but if she wanted to stop Mo from heading to the space-time river, she had to resort to things that she knew she should not. Now that things had come to this, Zhang Ruoxi had no other choice. She could only do her best to keep Mo occupied as she fervently hoped that Yang Kai sped up whatever he was doing. Otherwise, once her personal guards could no longer hold out anymore, she would not be able to stop Mo alone. Martial Peak. Chapter 5983. Ninth Level. Within Mu's space-time river, Yang Kai was shrouded in his own space-time river as he used it to greedily devour everything around him. The river was made out of Tao strengths. Every single undercurrent and wave surged with Tao strength, and as time passed, Yang Kai's space-time river grew bigger while Mu's river shrank. It was entirely by chance, but it could not be denied that Yang Kai and Mu had walked the same path. This gave meaning to Mu's countless years of patience and perseverance. Due to trying to open the profound source gate in the past, Mu's space-time river was no longer complete, which cut off her future path. She could not explore the deeper mysteries of the martial Tao. Therefore, she passed down her hopes to those who came after her. Among all the hidden hands she left behind, her space-time river was the final gift she had to offer. However, if a person wanted to harness this gift to make themselves more powerful, it would take time. Perhaps even Mu would not have expected Yang Kai to be approved by so many of her remnant shadows. Under normal circumstances, if black ink strength had the irrefutable advantage in any of the 3,000 universe worlds and there was no hope of suppressing and sealing that particular source piece, there would be no reason for Yang Kai to waste any time on that universe world. Nevertheless, during Yang Kai's previous travels, he did his best to find every single remaining shadow of Mu. He wanted to save them all from their suffering and take them away from the universe worlds. Each one that disappeared signified that the Mu of that time approved of Yang Kai. After moving through some 2,700 universe worlds, Yang Kai received approval from over 2,000 of them, which was a massive number. This allowed him to devour and refine Mu's space-time river with greater efficiency. As Yang Kai's river kept expanding, his command over the many Tao strengths increased as well. The enlightenment from the many mysteries exploded in his mind. Yang Kai was deeply engrossed and could not extricate himself from what was happening inside his mind. The joy of glimpsing into the mysteries of every Grand Tao was impossibly tantalizing for any master. Grand Taos were the basis behind all existence and the ultimate goal of all cultivators. If someone were to be entirely immersed in this, there was a chance that they would forget all else and transform into Tao strengths themselves. This meant that Yang Kai's situation was tricky as well. On the one hand, he had to resist the lure of the Tao strengths, while on the other, he had to do his best to take them in to strengthen his own mastery of the Grand Taos. He tried his best to maintain the balance of refining as quickly as possible while still remaining in control over his senses, making sure to not let himself be lost in the process. All of a sudden, his mind felt as if it had received an awakening. It was as if he had broken through a barrier that had been preventing him from growing stronger. Yang Kai realized that his mastery of the Tao of Time had reached the 9th level. A master's strength was essentially divided based on their cultivation. Of the 9 orders of the open heaven realm, each higher order was much stronger than the previous. It was a clear and easy way of distinguishing between masters. However, this kind of division was not comprehensive, and there could be great disparity in power even among masters in the same order of open heaven realm. The disparity came from the difference in accumulation of each master, the power differential in the heritage of the master's small universe, as well as the master's understanding of their grand daos. The open heaven realm involved the discovery and mastery of grand dao. In a sense, the higher the mastery of one's grand dao, the stronger the master. Since the dawn of existence, no one had a clear way of defining the levels of mastery of the grand dao. Thus, Xueqi had split the mastery of grand daos into 9 levels based on his own growth. Superficial contact, peering through the doors, taking the initial steps, traversing a familiar path, attaining mastery through comprehensive understanding, exceeding the ordinary to reach the extraordinary, standing above all others within sight, summiting the peak, and finally shocking history and dazzling the present. This was merely his own method of division, one he shared with others, and some had adopted it. Until now, none tried to correct it. Xueqi felt that he had differentiated them correctly. His primary grand daos were the Tao of time and the Tao of space. These were the Tao strengths that formed the basis of the space-time river. However, despite his many opportunities and his mastery over the grand daos, after all this time, he had only managed to cultivate the Tao of time and the Tao of space to the 8th level. All this while, Xueqi did not know how to break through to the 9th level. However, he had a vague feeling that if his mastery of the Tao of time reached the 9th level, an indescribable change was bound to happen. Finally, as Xueqi refined Mu's space-time river, he was able to make a breakthrough on one of his primary grand daos, allowing it to reach the 9th level. To think it's the Tao of time first, not the Tao of space. Xueqi had always thought it would have been the latter that would be the first to reach the 9th level of mastery. Xueqi was a little taken aback as the Tao of space was the first one that he truly cultivated. He had his dragon source to thank for his ability to cultivate the Tao of time to its current level. The Tao of time was the bloodline talent of the dragon clan. All at once, Xueqi gained a mysterious sense of understanding. As he lifted his hand ever so slightly within the space-time river, he seemed to be able to grab onto the flow of time. In the past, he was able to make time flow quicker within his space-time river to cultivate 10 times faster, but he could not truly control the passage of time. But he could do so now. With the increase in Xueqi's command over the Tao of time, his dragon veins surged and he could not stop himself from raising his head and letting out a dragon roar. His dragon scales rustled as his dragon form enlarged. His dragon vein had advanced even further. This was a great surprise. However, before Xueqi could dwell on his joy, his mastery over his other primary grand Tao broke into the 9th level as well. This time it was the Tao of space. Once again, the mysterious sense of enlightenment flooded Xueqi's mind. He felt his mind grow hazy. It was as if it had been stuffed full with the truth of the grand daos, which he did not understand in the past. The truth of existence was unfolding in front of him. He quickly harnessed the strength of his soul-warming lotus, even though he was uncertain whether it would help. The clarity that poured back into his mind made him feel a little better. Now that Xueqi's mastery of both the Tao of space and the Tao of time had reached the 9th level, his space-time river became even more massive. Previously, his space-time river looked like a blade of grass in comparison to Mu's river, which was like a tall tree. However, after all the refining he had done thus far, his river grew bigger and could now be likened to a shrub instead. While the tree was still a tree, it had grown a lot smaller. That was not the only difference. At first, Xueqi had a hard time keeping up with his frenzied attempt to refine Mu's river to strengthen his own. The Tao strengths of space and time formed the foundation of the river, and without a strong enough command over both, it was hard for Xueqi to control the colossal river. It was akin to a building. If a building's foundation had only been built for 5 stories, the building ran the risk of collapsing if 10 stories were built instead. Xueqi's command over the Taos of time and Tao of space was the foundation in this scenario, and by having a greater mastery over these 2 grand Taos, his foundation became stronger. This transformation was evident in the river's physical state. While it looked a little scattered earlier, it was now a lot more concentrated. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5984. Standstill. With the grand Taos of space and time breaking through to the 9th level of mastery, Xueqi's space-time river now had a stronger foundation, Thus, it began devouring and refining Mu's space-time river at a far quicker rate. As the frenzy of devouring and refining continued, Yang Kai's mastery over the Grand Daos increased as well. Next was a breakthrough in the Spear Dao. Then, a breakthrough in the Sword Dao. Breakthroughs in the Alchemic Dao, Array Dao, and Yin Yang Dao soon followed. Yang Kai's understanding of each Grand Dao rose in rapid succession. The barriers were broken through and he achieved a new height of mastery. With each breakthrough, Yang Kai's mind was filled with strange and wondrous enlightenment, granting him further clarity in each Grand Dao. Outside the space-time river, light and darkness continued to clash. Both the primordial light and primordial darkness did not possess their full power anymore. But as the darkness remained whole and continued to grow over the years, Mo had become a lot more powerful than Zhang Ruoxi. This held true even when Yang Kai had used the profound source gate to suppress and seal a third of his source. Mo would have regained all of his strength and be even more powerful right now if it had not been for the many hidden hands Mu left behind. Zhang Ruoxi could only just barely challenge Mo to a fight with the help of the 9 palaces formation she formed with her 8 small stone race personal guard. In just a few hours though, the 8 small stone race masters were littered with cracks. It looked as if they could crumble into a pile of rubble at any moment now. Zhang Ruoxi tried her best to buy time, but she did not know how much longer she could continue to hold out. All she could do was fervently hope that Yang Kai could hurry up. Each time light and darkness collided, their respective powers wore down the other. Light dispelled darkness while darkness devoured light. Time and time again, Zhang Ruoxi and Mo continued to weaken each other. This was most evident in the way Ruoxi's white wings had dimmed and Mo seemed to have lost some of his prior madness. This is not a good sign. Zhang Ruoxi could tell that Mo, as the consciousness that sprung from primordial darkness, did not have full control over Black Ink's strength. The years of growth and accumulation had made the power increase beyond Mo's ability to freely wield. That was the reason why her arrival bearing the strength of the primordial light had drawn out the frenzied resentment of the primordial darkness and caused Mo to lose his rationality. At the same time, Mo had an instinctive, obsessive yearning and protectiveness of Mu's space-time river. Even his subconscious would not allow anyone to touch what Mu had left behind. As Black Ink's strength clashed with Mo's consciousness, his actions began displaying contradicting desires. At times, he fiercely chased down Zhang Ruoxi, but at times, he turned back around to head for the space-time river. Zhang Ruoxi relied on this dichotomy to provoke Mo and keep him occupied. However, once Mo regained his senses, it would not be so easy for her to do so. Although Mo currently possessed strength that surpassed all others, he was currently behaving like a wild beast without a sense of rationality. So Zhang Ruoxi could still deal with him by employing the right strategy. Even though Mo regaining his rationality meant that his raw power would be weaker, Zhang Ruoxi was not confident that she could stop him then. What one feared the most was often the very thing to occur. As the clashes continued, Zhang Ruoxi could sense that Mo's gaze was getting clearer. To make things worse, her personal guard could barely hold out anymore. That was not the only bad news though. Even her strength, which relied on her Heaven's Order bloodline to harmonize the powers of Yin and Yang, was beginning to show signs of instability. Her Heaven's Order bloodline was indeed powerful. It was the only thing that could bridge the powers granted by the burning light and serene glimmer. Thanks to Zhang Ruoxi's many years of diligent cultivation, she was finally able to reconcile the two opposing powers and draw them into her. As a result, she possessed superior strength. However, her ninth order cultivation was still quite weak in comparison to the powers of the burning light and serene glimmer. She could not withstand a prolonged fight that involved such overwhelming power. On the other hand, Zhang Ruoxi dared not hold back in a fight against Mo. She went all out with every strike, and as the number of clashes increased, her power became more and more unstable. Her personal guards were in bad shape and her strength was becoming unstable, so she knew she did not have much time left. Even so, she never once considered retreating. Instead, her eyes filled with determination as she made a decision. After yet another ferocious clash, the two figures separated. Zhang Ruoxi could clearly sense that even more cracks emerged on the bodies of the 8 personal guard behind her. Her grip on the Heaven's Order sword tightened and she exhaled softly as her wings began to flap and her presence grew even more imposing. In the void opposite her, Mo stood unmoving with his head lowered. Just as Zhang Ruoxi prepared to strike once more, Mo raised his hand to block her. "You should stop now." Zhang Ruoxi did not listen. Her presence continued to intensify with no signs of stopping. Nevertheless, she could not ignore Mo's present state and could not help asking, "Have you regained your rationality?" Mo raised his head and looked at her. Although his eyes showed signs of a struggle, it was no longer in a state of madness. "I have to thank you for that," he replied. She knew what Mo meant. Initially, the power of primordial darkness was still too strong for Mo to bear, causing his consciousness to devolve into a frenzied state. However, as he and She continued to clash, the powers of light and darkness ate away at each other. Both their powers were weakened in the battle. Now that Mo's consciousness could overpower his strength, he regained some rationality. "That won't be necessary," She coolly replied. Mo's brows furrowed ever so slightly. "You will die if you use that attack." Mo could tell that She wanted to harness all of her remaining power to engage him in a final clash that would determine life or death. "You probably won't die, but you will suffer," She said. "That's why you should stop." "I don't wish to kill you," Mo urged. She showed no signs of stopping. She did not respond to Mo at all. Instead, she continued to harness her power and strength to prove her determination with her actions. Cracking sounds could be heard from the 8 behind her. With this strike, the 8 of them would turn into dust. Mo's gaze turned cold as he snarled, "If you insist on dying, I am willing to fulfill your desire for death, but have you thought about what would happen to Yongkai if you died?" She was a little startled. "Sir would be deeply saddened by my death, right? That's enough for me." She still showed no signs of backing down. Instead, she let out a faint smile. This made Mo exasperated as he could not resist saying, "Why are human women so stubborn? You think it's worth it to die at my hands to protect him, but have you ever thought about the guilt and torture the living would have to endure? If you truly want to act in his best interests, I advise you to calm down and look at things from his perspective. You staying alive should come before everything else." She stared at Mo in shock this time, brimming with confusion. "What's going on? The one who wields the darkest of all powers that exist is attempting to reason with me during a life-and-death moment?" She could not help but find it unbelievable, especially since Mo made a good point. Instinctively, she suddenly felt that Mo was scheming something. "Don't look at me like that," Mo curtly snorted. "I lived among you humans for more years than you have lived. We once worked together and protected each other. There was even someone very important to me once. All I wanted to do was to help her, but in the end, I was destined to ruin everything." When Mo saw what She was about to do, he could not help but recall his own past. "Mu must have felt great anguish when she decided to lock me up. In the end, I let her down." Mo turned towards the space-time river and said, "Why don't we just wait here? When he comes out, I will fight him." She frowned as she looked at Mo, too afraid to let her guard down. Mo turned back to her once more. "There's nothing for you to worry about. You are free to strike me at any given moment and engage me in a fight to the death. As you said, even if I kill you, I will suffer in the process, and when he comes out, perhaps I won't be able to hold my own against him." She simply could not figure out what Mo was thinking. It would indeed be great for her if she did as Mo suggested. She had enough strength to unleash a powerful final strike, and she could do so at any time, so the only one who had anything to gain by agreeing to Mo's suggestion was her. Besides, even if Mo was plotting something sinister, would she be able to stop him? If Mo is truly willing to simply stop and wait now, once Sir comes out, he and I can attack Mo together. "You better not do anything rash." After hesitating for a brief moment, She withdrew her imposing aura. "Naturally." Mo smirked as it remained standing in place. She nodded. The two masters who had been dueling in a brutal all-out fight to the death now stood together in the void, waiting in silence. Sure enough, life was unpredictable. She was still on guard, so she led her 8 personal guards over to a spot between Mo and the space-time river to block. Mo saw what she was doing and showed no inclination of stopping her, puzzling her even further. That being said, she had never encountered Mo before. She imagined Mo to be a brutal, sinister, and vicious existence, but after interacting with him herself, she realized that was not the case. Though confused, as she stared into Mo's eyes, she had a vague inkling and could not help but ask, "What do you want to do?" Mo's gaze went past her and stared at the massive space-time river as he asked, "It's very grand and beautiful, isn't it?" She did not answer Mo's question, instead frowning in doubt. So what if it is? It saved me from endless darkness, Emo replied. So to me it is the light. This is what she left behind, and since she has chosen a successor, I want to see what happens. If her successor can kill me, it won't be a bad way for me to die. After a pause, Emo continued with a heavy heart. When it comes down to it, I did something I shouldn't have. It only stands to reason that I pay the price for it. If you wish to die, I can fulfill your wish for you. Zhang Ruoxi shot back. Emo eyed her coolly. Only the person who gave me my new life can kill me. No one else has the right to do so. Martial Peak. Chapter 5985. Perseverance. Alas, the one who had the right to kill Mo was no longer around and nothing mattered to him anymore. Everything and everyone in existence was meaningless and he could kill them off as he desired without feeling any hesitance. Zhang Ruoxi and Mo stood opposite each other outside the space-time river. She remained vigilant at all times, but Mo did not do anything. He simply stared at the space-time river that cut through the void and watched as it churned. Meanwhile, the human race army was snaking its way through the large battlefield as it constantly attacked the Black Ink Clan army's front lines to weaken them. The humans were actually able to make good progress. Furthermore, the small stone race army was fearlessly confronting the Black Ink Clan. Many lives came to an end with every breath. A battle of this scale had never been seen before. The three parties out on the battlefield numbered into the billions when combined. The small stone race army consisted of hundreds of millions while the Black Ink Clan army was twice as large. On the other hand, there were less than 20 million human race masters left, which was not even a tenth of either of the other two. Despite being much lower in numbers, the humans came out on top when it came to the average power. Only Fourth Order masters and above could directly join in the crusade, and after many millennia of cultivation, the human race now had a large number of Seventh Order and Eighth Order masters. In this respect, neither the small stone race nor the Black Ink Clan could compare to the humans. Even though they had massive numbers, weak soldiers who could not contribute much made up most of their ranks. This was especially true of the Black Ink Clan. Whenever the human race army crossed paths with large groups of the Black Ink Clan's cannon fodder, all of the latter would be exterminated in great sweeping waves of death. Nevertheless, being so few was still an undeniable disadvantage. Although the human race army was able to attack the Black Ink Clan and wipe them out in large groups, they could not persist for long. The humans started this battle, but it was the small stone race army that enabled them to keep going. If Zhang Ruoxi had not brought the small stone race reinforcements over, the humans would have been defeated the moment the primordial heaven's source grand restriction broke. These were sorrowful times. Many of the small stone race soldiers died and turned into rocks and pebbles that littered the battlefield. The divine spirits who had the great sun and great moon marks kept using the power of the marks to draw out the power of yin and yang inside the remains of the small stone race who had been sacrificed. These powers were then transformed into purifying light which not only killed many Black Ink clansmen, but also purified the environment of the battlefield. It was thanks to this that the humans and the small stone race could still put up a fight against the Black Ink Clan. Initially, Ade and Air, the two giant spirit gods, were able to move about with impunity. Without enough royal lords to keep them pinned down, they were completely invincible and seas of blood formed wherever they went. However, as more and more of the royal lords joined forces to besiege Ade and Air, the latter pair slowly lost their ability to act freely. The fierce battle continued. Every few days, the human race army would retreat behind the small stone race's lines to rest and regroup before charging out again. Pure Yang Pass, which led the human race army into battle, was now a wreck. It did not look like it could hold out much longer, and the suppressing Black Ink Fortress was in a similar state. The extreme intensity of the battle was a taxing trial for all the humans, with even the Ninth Order masters having a hard time, let alone those of lower orders. Nevertheless, the humans could not stop. This was the final confrontation, and if they backed down, total extermination was the only fate that awaited them. Therefore, all of them grit their teeth and persevered. A month after the start of the battle, the situation on the battlefield grew clearer. Mi Jingluan was fatigued and ashen-faced as he stood atop the worn Pure Yang Pass, his forehead covered in a layer of sweat. He had overexerted himself. As the supreme commander of the human race army, he faced the most pressure. Not only did he have to keep an eye on the situation on the battlefield to promptly make the right strategic decisions, but as a Ninth Order master, he was also in charge of controlling Pure Yang Pass to attack the enemy. At this point, he had expended so much energy that his foundation had suffered heavy damage. However, his sense of helplessness stemmed not from his exhaustion, but from the fact that the situation was not in the human race's favor. There were far too many of the Black Ink clansmen inside the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction, twice as many as there were small stone race soldiers, and after a month-long battle, the Black Ink clan was beginning to show signs of suppressing the former. If this continued, in less than 2 weeks, the small stone race army would be defeated. Once the small stone race army was vanquished, the humans would not be able to survive. They were bound to follow the small stone race army to their deaths. Mi Jingluan could not be resigned to this. The fight between the human race and the Black Ink clan began towards the end of the late ancient era and had carried on for millions of years since then. Was it going to end in tragedy for the human race? Still, there was not much he could do to change things now. In a massive battle like this, there was not a single strategy that could lead to a decisive outcome. Victory hinged on the strength of both parties. Mi Jingluan could not stop himself from casting a glance into the depths of the void. Over a month ago, Zhang Ruoshi had abruptly left the battlefield and the 8 Ninth Order small stone race masters followed soon after. Nothing had been heard from them ever since. Initially, great aftershocks of an intense battle reverberated out from that part of the void, but soon, everything went silent. Even now, Mi Jingluan did not know what was happening over there. All he knew was that Zhang Ruoshi and her 8 personal guards were there. Yang Kai was there too, along with Mo. If anything could turn the tides of this battle, it had to come from that part of the void. Stay strong. We must persist. As long as the worst did not happen, they still had a shred of hope of survival. The churning of the space-time river became even more ferocious. After a month of devouring and refining Mu's space-time river, Yang Kai's space-time river had grown unimaginably large, while Mu's river, which was outside his, was turning into an empty shell. Thanks to this final gift, Yang Kai's space-time river had enlarged to the point where it could rival that of Mu's. Outside the river, Zhang Ruoshi and her 8 personal guards were still in a battle formation. They were intrinsically connected and kept their guards up the whole time. Thankfully, throughout this whole time, Mo did not move. He merely stood quietly and waited. At last, a resounding splash sounded and the space-time river which had meandered across the void for countless eons was completely destroyed. It was replaced by another river that was comparable to it, but the new one was churning even more ferociously and its water seemed even more forceful. This was not a sign that Yang Kai had surpassed Mu in strength. Instead, it was a result of his inability to fully control this sudden growth in strength. If Yang Kai had full control over the power of his river, it would be completely still and silent, not causing such a huge commotion like now. Zhang Ruoshi had to fight the urge to turn around and look, her expression grim. Just a moment ago, she clearly sensed a flash of murderous intent coming from Momo did not bother to hide it at all. Apart from the clear murderous intent, Zhang Ruoshi also picked up a sense of hatred and regret. As she sensed the churning of the Tao strengths behind her, she knew that Yang Kai had succeeded, though she had no idea what he did. Martial Peak. Chapter 5986. The Might of a Creator. Amidst the churning waves, Yang Kai's figure appeared as the Tao strength surged around him. Based on strength alone, he was stronger than both Mo and Zhang Ruoshi after their earlier fight. This was a result of his heightened mastery of Grand Das. The clearest evidence of this was the size of his space-time river. Yang Kai's space-time river was comparable to the one Mu left behind and it had grown colossal beyond imagination. A baby dragon was bound to become a divine dragon someday. Although Yang Kai's cultivation did not increase by much, his strength was leaps and bounds above what it once was. A piercing gaze shot over at him. Yang Kai immediately spotted Mo, who was standing in the distance. The abhorrence and murderous intent in its eyes were plainly visible. Mo looked a lot like Little 11th whom Yang Kai met inside the primordial world. If Little 11th grew up as a normal human, he would resemble Mo's current appearance. Ruoshi stood between Yang Kai and Mo with a grim and vigilant expression. Yang Kai had been busy refining Mu's final gift and knew nothing of what was happening outside the river all this while. Upon sensing Mo and Ruoshi's present states though, he realized that they had engaged in a fight earlier. Both seemed to have walked away injured as neither one of them felt as powerful as he expected them to be. His divine sense tingled as it spread out like a gush of water. Soon, he picked up on the situation out on the battlefield in the distance. Xueqi's brow furrowed slightly. Compared to the situation over here, the human race army and the small stone race army were in a bleak situation. If things continued as they were, they would certainly be defeated. Ruoshi! Xueqi called out at once. I'm here, sir, Zhang Ruoshi swiftly replied. Head to the battlefield and help them. Zhang Ruoshi was startled. She figured that since Xueqi had emerged, they could work together to take on Mo now. While she could not face off against Mo alone, if she and Xueqi worked together, they had a good chance of winning this fight. Mo was a lot weaker now thanks to both Xueqi's deed of suppressing and sealing his source as well as the earlier fight with Zhang Ruoshi. Light and darkness had clashed and worn each other down. If they got rid of Mo, they would completely eradicate the threat against the 3,000 worlds. Xueqi seemed to have deduced Zhang Ruoshi's thoughts as he said, the human race army is the only remaining strength we have now. A victory against Mo is meaningless if they get wiped out. Go and help them at once, Ruoshi. Leave things here to me. Zhang Ruoshi knew that Xueqi was right. If the human race army was entirely vanquished, then even if she and Xueqi managed to defeat Mo, it was a pointless victory. The goal of this battle was to ensure the survival of the human race, and victory hinged on bringing the entire army to victory. She clenched her jaw and said, Be careful, sir. I'll come back as soon as possible. After glaring viciously at Mo one last time, her wings fluttered and she turned into a streak of light before shooting off towards the battlefield. Once she left, Mo and Xueqi were left alone in the void. A wise decision, Mo remarked. Xueqi quirked his eyebrows. How so? She's in a poor state right now, Mo commented with a faint smile. You asked her to leave to save her life, right? Xueqi's brow was tightly knitted. I thought I was going up against an evil being who has lost all its rationality. I didn't expect to be facing off against an intelligent opponent. This makes things a lot more challenging. With just one look, Xueqi noticed Zhang Ruoshi's condition. Although he did not know what would happen when the Heaven's Order bloodline harmonized the powers of Yin and Yang, he could tell that the 8 Ninth Order small stone race masters behind Ruoshi were on the verge of crumbling apart. As the core of the 9 Palaces formation, she was undoubtedly shouldering the heaviest burden. If she stayed here and partook in the fight against Mo, once the 8 fell apart, Ruoshi would be doomed once Mo found the chance to strike her down. Naturally, protecting Ruoshi was not the only reason why Xueqi told her to leave. The human race and the small stone race were in dire need of help too. They were bound to lose if they did not receive any outside intervention on the battlefield. Now that Zhang Ruoshi had gone back to the battlefield, it was unlikely for her to be involved in any fight as taxing as the one against Mo earlier. As long as she was careful and ensured that her 8 personal guards did not die, she would not be in any grave danger. That being said, Xueqi was taken aback by the current Mo. As Xueqi said, he thought he would be facing an evil being without any sense of rationality. However, Mo was evidently able to think and act calmly. Xueqi would much rather go up against a senseless killing machine as it was easier to deal with an opponent like that. I'm surprised you didn't stop me from devouring and refining Mu's space-time river, Xueqi spoke up. While refining the gift from Mu, he was vigilant against the possibility of Mo interfering, but the latter did not do anything else after his initial attempt was interrupted. Although Zhang Ruoshi had come over in time to occupy Mo, what Xueqi saw when he came out was simply a silent standoff between Mo and Ruoshi. It was entirely unexpected. He knew that Mo could have chosen to forcefully break away from Ruoshi, though he would have to pay a price. However, from Mo's standpoint, stopping Xueqi from refining Mu's river had to be the primary goal, and it would have been worth paying a price to accomplish that. After hearing Xueqi's comment, Mo lowered his eyes and let out a soft sigh. Did Mu leave something in the river to be used against me? Xueqi nodded. You noticed that as expected. Mu had left her space-time river for someone who would succeed her, but it was impossible to refine the entire river in the blink of an eye. During that time, Mo was bound to interfere. It was not surprising that someone with as much intelligence and foresight as Mu had considered this and left something behind inside the river to target Mo. If Mo entered her river, he would end up stumbling around the endlessness of space-time in a hazy daze and would not be able to find Xueqi. What Mo said to Zhang Ruoshi earlier was simply for the sake of convincing her. Even if she did not try to stop him, He would not enter the river unless absolutely necessary. But without entering the river, he would not be able to locate Xueqi, and thus, he would not be able to stop the latter from devouring and refining it. With all that Mu had set in place, Xueqi had guaranteed success at refining the river. Mu had been wise and insightful, and naturally, Mo knew her incredibly well. After spending all those years together, both she and Mo had a thorough understanding of each other. Just as Mu predicted the possibility of Mo entering the river, Mo also figured that Mu would have left behind countermeasures to deal with him as well. It was yet another confrontation after all these years that resulted in a stalemate. Xueqi was the only one who benefited from the situation. He had a major leap in his mastery over the 10,000 Grandas, and his space-time river had grown to an indescribable size. Even if you obtained the power Mu left behind, so what? Mo's eyes were filled with disdain. Do you think that's enough for you to defeat me? Xueqi smirked. Let me see what someone in the creator realm can do. As he spoke, he raised both his hands and the space-time river beneath him began churning violently. It was as if the river turned into a rampaging dragon as the waves crashed in thunderous splashes while Tao's strength surged. All at once, scores of rope-like water dragons formed from Tao's strength shot out of the river and flew straight at Mo. Raised his fist and punched forcefully at the void. The space in front of him shattered and the myriad of void cracks that formed as a result turned into a barrier that blocked the onslaught of the water dragons. Then, Mo took a step forward and moved past the shattered space, arriving right in front of Xueqi as he stared down at him with an indifferent expression. Your ability to wield Tao's strength is less than 1,000th of what Mu was capable of. Black ink's strength rippled forth and its destructive power wrapped around Mo's fist which came crashing down. Xueqi's eyes hardened. He could instinctively sense the might of this punch and knew he could not allow it to make contact with him. Otherwise, death would be his only fate. The river churned and formed a layer of Tao's strength that acted as a barrier. However, the Tao strength barrier only lasted for a blink of an eye before the fist shattered it apart. Thankfully, that had given Xueqi enough time to summon his Azure Dragon Spear. Now that he had his weapon in hand, he harnessed the Tao strengths and sent his spear flying out at the fist. A gust of unstoppable power came at Xueqi from the front, and he felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His body froze up for a brief moment before he went flying backwards. He stumbled into his river and nearly lost his grip on the spear. Weak! Mo looked down at his fist. There was a tiny white mark left behind from the Azure Dragon Spear, but it soon vanished. The invincible Azure Dragon Spear could not even scratch Mo despite Xueqi landing a strike with all his strength. This was a clear sign of the power disparity between the two. A powerful and imposing manner did not necessarily translate into true might. A real master could easily keep his power hidden and undetectable from the outside. Xueqi's outward display of dominance and imposingness was in fact a sign that he could not fully control the power he had. A figure stepped out of the river. It was Xueqi who had been pushed back inside it earlier. His expression was grim. Even though he deduced that he was not strong enough to be Mo's equal right now, he did not expect their disparity to be this big. Is this the might of someone in the creator realm? Xueqi had suppressed and sealed over 30% of Mo's source, so what would Mo be able to do if that had not been the case? His earlier punch would have probably been enough to kill me. While Xueqi was caught up in these thoughts, Mo was already storming over. Even though Xueqi used the Tao strengths of the river to form barriers and restraints, it was not enough to stop Mo. Apart from Black Ink's strength, yet another mysterious power was swirling around Mo. It was most likely creation force. All of the Tao strengths that came near Mo would instantly shatter without accomplishing anything. As soon as Xueqi managed to steady himself, Mo arrived in front of him, his fist flying out again, aiming to pulverize his opponent. Xueqi was not about to let that happen. Waves rippled out of the Azure Dragon Spear with Tao strength circling it as it moved forward once more. Mo did not change his attack, but the simple blow was hiding an unfathomable strength that allowed it to easily deflect Xueqi's attack before closing in on its target. Martial Peak. Chapter 5987. Absorbing Tao Strengths. In that moment of crisis, Xueqi's Azure Dragon Spear suddenly vanished from his hand as he stowed it away. Following that, he grabbed Mo's shoulder with both hands and flung himself backwards in an attempt to drag Mo into the space-time river. The short exchange just now made it clear to Xueqi that he was unable to hold his own against Mo right now. Since that was the case, He needed to bring the fight to an advantageous environment for him, and the space-time river was an excellent choice. Xueqi was confident that as long as he was able to drag Mo into his space-time river, he would be able to unleash even more powerful attacks that could perhaps be enough to deal with this enemy. However, before Xueqi could do anything else, Mo kicked him. Xueqi felt his chest caving in as he fell into the river. Waste! Mo stood above the river. The torrential waves fiercely charged at Mo, but they would die out once they were within 10 steps of him, filling his eyes with disappointment. Mu's successor is weaker than I thought. He's not even stronger than that woman earlier, who wielded a portion of the primordial light's power. At the very least, she'd been able to cause a bit of trouble for me, but Mu's successor is nothing more than a child. As Mo quietly eyed the space-time river beneath him, he lightly raised his hand. In that case, I shall destroy it all. A gust of pure and concentrated black ink strength unlike any that had been seen before poured out towards the space-time river as the might of a creator began to emerge. Any part of the river that was touched by black ink strength immediately showed signs of being corrupted by it. The river was made out of Tao strengths. Ordinarily, black ink strength from the Black Ink clan was only capable of corrupting living beings. However, as the source of black ink strength, Mo was even capable of corrupting Tao strengths. As Xueqi's body sank downwards into the river, his heart sank along with it. With just 2 strikes, he had a clear understanding of just how powerful Mo was. I definitely won't be able to defeat him. Xueqi coughed lightly and the stench of blood filled his mouth. He was now a divine dragon with thick skin and hard flesh, impervious to most ordinary strength, but a simple kick from Mo was enough to break a few of his ribs. It had been a long time since he last suffered such injuries. The pain of his broken bones sticking into his organs cleared his mind, and in the very next breath, he sensed the changes happening to his space-time river. He realized the severity of the situation. If Mo was allowed to continue what he was doing, sooner or later, his space-time river would be completely corrupted by black ink strength. He would lose all his Tao strengths, and even if he did not die, he would become crippled and useless. The urgent sense of danger consumed Xueqi, and he knew that if he did not do something soon, it would be too late. After stabilizing himself, Xueqi gathered his thoughts and wielded all the strength he could muster. The next instant, his body turned into an invisible black hole that devoured large amounts of the river's water. He was refining the Tao strengths and absorbing them into his body. Xueqi had been able to put away his original space-time river and summon it out when he wanted to deal with his opponent because he had gained the river through hard work and diligent cultivation. It was the manifestation of his own Tao strengths. However, the gift from Mu had been too overwhelming. Even though he used his space-time river to devour and refine Mu's space-time river, which led to a great increase in his mastery over the 10,000 Grand Daos, he now had a problem on his hands too. He did not have full control over his new space-time river. Currently, he was like a 3-year-old who was trying to wield a massive sledgehammer. Though the sledgehammer was powerful, he could not even lift it. That was the reason why he could not fight back against Mo. It was to the point where he seemed even weaker than Zhang Ruoxi. After all, Ruoxi had diligently cultivated for some 2,000 years in the chaotic dead territory. By using her Heaven's Order bloodline to harmonize the powers of Yin and Yang to a level where she could control it, she was able to unleash all of that power freely. There was only one way for Xueqi to deal with his current situation, and that was to refine the Tao strengths and absorb them into his body. That was the only method for him to gain control over his new space-time river and be strong enough to oppose Mo. It was an extremely dangerous move. If he were careless for even a moment, he would explode from the overwhelming power of the massive space-time river and would undoubtedly die. That was the reason why Xueqi did not choose to do so earlier, but under the present circumstances, he had to throw caution to the wind and take the risk. As he did this, a huge vortex emerged on top of the river. It looked like a large mouth that was swallowing the water. Meanwhile, Mo was still channeling his black ink strength and corrupting the river. By doing so, Mo could even absorb the river and strengthen itself. After seeing the appearance of the vortex though, Mo's eyes flashed with an unreadable glimmer as he scoffed. You finally realized it? Mo had spent many years with Mu and understood the space-time river far better than Xueqi did, so he could immediately tell what Xueqi was doing when he saw the movement of the river. Both of them continued to refine the power of the space-time river which rapidly shrank before them. When it came down to it though, this was still Xueqi's space-time river. Thus, Mo could not refine it as quickly as Xueqi could. It could be said that Xueqi and Mo were devouring the river at a ratio of 7-3. Beneath the river, Xueqi's face had turned red as his dragon vein throbbed with ferocity within him. The Tao strengths he devoured and absorbed into his body made him feel as if he were going to explode. He even had the urge to transform into a divine dragon. Nevertheless, he squashed down this thought. Although turning into a divine dragon could ease the pressure on his body, there was still a limit. It would not make a difference if he could not find a way to surpass that limit. Therefore, he chose to grit his teeth and bear it. Thankfully, he had endured a similar kind of pressure when he first started taking in the gift Mu left behind, and was now able to have a marginally easier time with it. As time passed, the massive space-time river had shrunk by about 30%. Beneath the river, Xueqi was surrounded by Tao strengths, while above the river, Mo's aura had grown a lot stronger too. All of a sudden, Xueqi's eyes hardened. As he continued to devour the power of the river, he raised his hands and snarled, "Rise!" The space-time river that cut across the void seemed to abruptly come to life as the water churned and the waves came crashing down at Mo. Mo's gaze darkened as he swiftly backed off. He knew that even with his present strength, he would have a hard time if he was struck by the full force of the space-time river. His eyes briefly flickered with surprise as he did not think that Xueqi would be able to gain control over the space-time river so quickly. If Xueqi was previously likened to a 3-year-old attempting to wield a sledgehammer and failing due to his lack of strength, then he was now a young child able to raise the sledgehammer, though luck and fate would determine whether or not he could strike his opponent with it. As the river surged, Xueqi's figure appeared out of it. It was clear that something was not right with his present state. It was as if an indescribable power gathered within his body. He looked like he was about to explode at any given moment. That was indeed the case. He was at his limit from the Tao strengths that had built up inside him. He felt a pressing need to let it all out of him, so with that thought in mind, he shot up and charged at Mo. As he moved, the colossal space-time river followed behind him like a shadow. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5988, Battle to the Death. In a flash, the two silhouettes collided and a fight broke out. Xueqi took the offensive and pushed out Tao strengths with each strike. He had to release the Tao strengths which had accumulated inside his body. Otherwise, he ran the risk of exploding. As a result of his ferocious attacks, Mo had to focus and fight back as well, using black ink strength to clash with and wipe out the rampaging Tao strengths. Even in the midst of the fight, Xueqi did not stop devouring the space-time river. There was a large vortex behind him that was sucking the river water into his body. As Xueqi continued absorbing Tao strength into his body, the power he could wield grew stronger and his attacks became more intense. After exchanging a dozen blows, Xueqi suffered a hit from Mo and flew backwards into the river. However, he soon emerged and charged at Mo once again. Although he faced setbacks, Xueqi showed no sign of despair. Instead, his thirst for battle grew even stronger. During the first clash between the two, Mo could send Xueqi flying back into the river as soon as he emerged. Despite being a ninth-order master, Xueqi could not fight back at all. Yet, he could now hold out against Mo for a brief moment. This was the result of his absorbing the Tao strengths into his body. It was also the reason why he could control even more of the river's power. "I can do better than this," Xueqi firmly believed. "As long as I can control the entire river, I'll be powerful enough to challenge Mo." Time and time again, he shot out at Mo and was knocked back. The space-time river continued to shrink as Xueqi's aura grew even more powerful. As time passed, Xueqi was able to hold out against Mo for increasing amounts of time. From withstanding an exchange of 10 or so blows, he was able to slowly increase that number to 20, 30, eventually reaching 100 without showing any sign of falling behind. This seemed to set Mo off and his attacks grew even more vicious as murderous intent surged. Xueqi used the profound source gate to suppress and seal over 30% of Mo's source, which weakened the latter by a fair amount. Mo's power had also been further weakened after the fight with Zhang Ruoxi. That being said, he had corrupted a sizable chunk of the river's power with black ink strength, which allowed him to make up for what he lost in the fight with Zhang Ruoxi. Mo was even more powerful now than when he first woke up. In a short amount of time, Xueqi was able to go from being completely powerless against Mo to just barely holding out against him, but that was already his limit. He couldn't defeat Mo in his current state. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Even if I gain control over the remaining river, it's unlikely that I'll be able to kill him. If Mo, the one behind everything, did not die, then the threat against all of existence would endure. Using the profound source grate to suppress and seal Mo's source had been the right thing to do. Yang Kai's previous journey had proved that the profound source gate could indeed accomplish that feat. However, when one went up against an entity this powerful, how was one supposed to suppress and seal them without defeating them first? The only way to end this once and for all was to break out of the shackles of the open heaven realm and ascend to a higher realm. However, this was something impossible for the current Yang Kai. It had not been long since he became a Ninth Order Master, and although he used the 2 open heaven realm cradles and the power of his space-time river to speed up his cultivation dramatically, it was only effective for him to grow within the Ninth Order realm. It was not enough for him to reach the realm beyond. Throughout history, the best and most talented humans had been limited by the shackles of the open heaven realm method. They could not break through them at all. Only Mu had been able to vaguely peek into the mysteries of an even higher martial Tao. Nevertheless, her space-time river was incomplete and she could not step over the barriers to enter the mysterious realm she touched upon. Even though Yang Kai had received Mu's gift, it was unlikely that he could accomplish what Mu and all the human race ancestors could not in such a short time. He did not have the barest inkling of enlightenment regarding the next realm. If he wanted to break out of the shackles of the open heaven realm, at the very least, he had to familiarize himself with his present strength and continue to gain knowledge and understanding through many years of accumulation and cultivation. Since he could not overcome the shackles of the open heaven realm, he had to find another way. Yang Kai dared not allow himself to be distracted for even a moment in his battle against Mo. He was up against an opponent who could kill him off at any moment. Over and over again, Yang Kai was sent flying backwards into the river. Although he looked completely battered, his situation was slowly taking a turn for the better. Only about 30% of the space-time river behind him was left now. The moment he absorbed all of the river, he would be able to wield strength far beyond what he could before. As the intense fight had broken out between Yang Kai and Mo, the fight on the battlefield in the distant void was just as ferocious. The Black Ink clan army was too numerous and the allied armies of the human race and the small stone race were beginning to show signs of defeat. If nothing changed, sooner or later, both armies would be completely wiped out. Once that happened, even the Ninth Order Masters could not be certain whether they could escape with their lives. Only the 2 giant spirit gods could most likely leave safely. This was not an outcome they could accept. Just as the battle reached its most pressing climax, a dazzling light shot out from the depths of the void. It was a familiar scene that renewed the human race master spirits as they knew who had come. As per Yang Kai's instructions, Zhang Ruoxi rushed back to the battlefield. The moment she arrived, she turned into a bolt of light that weaved across the battlefield multiple times. The flowing light acted like a sharp blade that slaughtered countless Black Ink clan soldiers and wrecked the seemingly impenetrable formations they had set up. All at once, the humans and the small stone race were relieved of much of the pressure they had been under. Soon after that, Ruoxi headed over to Ade and Air. The 2 giant spirit gods had proved to be invaluable allies to the humans, be it during the reoccupation of the No-Return Pass or the battle that broke out against the Black Ink Black Reinforcement Army. In both situations, the giant spirit gods had played pivotal roles. Ade and Air were currently in a tough situation once again. They were surrounded and besieged by many royal lords and could not provide any help to the rest of the battlefield. Therefore, after relieving the pressure against the allied armies of the human race and the small stone race, Zhang Ruoxi chose to aid the 2 giant spirit gods. As long as the 2 giant spirit gods were unencumbered, they would be able to draw the attention of a large number of masters from the Black Ink clan. The Black Ink clan would have to send even more royal lords over to keep these 2 occupied, thus relieving the pressure on the rest. Ruoxi alone was enough to rampage through enemy lines and leave the royal lords scared witless, let alone when she had formed a 9 palaces formation with her 8 personal guard. In the blink of an eye, the flash of light appeared beside Air. The 8 small stone race masters scattered around to seal the surroundings, their battle formation encapsulating a large portion of the void. The royal lords who had been attacking Air paled in response. They had learned the hard way just how terrifying this winged woman could be. Before the primordial heaven source grand restriction had even broken, she had charged inside alone and exterminated all the masters who lingered at the opening, which included dozens of royal lords. Her actions back then terrified the masters inside the grand restriction, so much so that they were too afraid to make any rash moves. Many royal lords had remained hidden in the darkness. They had personally witnessed how powerful Zhang Ruoxi was and were afraid of her strength. This was the reason why the Black Ink clan army did not rush out the moment the grand restriction broke. They only gained the courage to leave the shelter of darkness when she rushed into the depths of the void to deal with the Supreme One. No one expected this woman to come charging back out on the battlefield at such a critical moment. Naturally, if Mi Jingluan could tell which way the battle was going, the royal lords could as well. The Black Ink clan army had the upper hand right now, and as long as no unexpected variables were introduced, the Black Ink clan would eventually be able to vanquish the humans and small stone race. When the time came, all of existence would belong to the Black Ink clan as the human race would be wiped out in totality. They were only a step away from their grand success, so how could the royal lords back down now? Thus, even though Zhang Ruoxi and her personal guard were wielding the might of their 9 palaces formation, a large number of masters from the Black Ink clan still fearlessly charged forward to stop them. Once again, the allied armies of the humans race and the small stone race were relieved of even more pressure. As the sword light of the Heaven's Order sword flashed, the part of the battlefield where Zhang Ruoxi was seemingly turned into an abyss of death. Be it territory lords or royal lords, none could escape from her or even put up a fight. Each time sword light flashed, numerous masters from the Black Ink clan perished. Their glory and dignity as masters was completely trampled on. Once someone reached a certain level of power, it became child's play for them to slaughter those in their path. In just a few moments, over 20 royal lords were killed. Ah, who had been harassed by the royal lords all this time, was finally freed from those who had been keeping him pinned down. With a loud roar, he began attacking the nearby royal lords. However, before he could truly unleash his strength, a new group of royal lords rushed over. The Black Ink clan could tell that the allied armies no longer posed a threat to them, and they could use their advantage in numbers to keep them occupied. At this moment, the only ones who posed a threat to the Black Ink clan were Zhang Ruoxi and the 2 giant spirit gods. Thus, they had to stop these 3 no matter what, even if it cost them the lives of their royal lords. On this part of the battlefield, royal lords and territory lords fell like leaves from a tree in a howling storm. The black blood and Black Ink strength that escaped their corpses turned the void into a patch of darkness, which seemed to want to devour everything in its wake. Amidst it all, the sword light of the Heaven's Order sword shone brilliantly. Despite the show of force she was putting on, Zhang Ruoxi's original plan had actually been foiled. Initially, she wanted to save Ah before working together with him to extricate Ah. Then, the 3 of them could charge out onto the main battlefield and rampage. Even though the Black Ink clan was massive in numbers, they would not be able to stop the 3 of them from slaughtering those in their path if they remained mobile. Given enough time and room to take action, these 3 powerful existences could massacre the entire Black Ink clan army on their own. However, the Black Ink clan promptly reacted to the situation and Zhang Ruoxi ended up being tied down to this part of the battlefield. Even Ah, whom she had only just rescued, was once again completely surrounded by royal lords and could no longer do much. Now that it had come to this, Zhang Ruoxi acted per the hand she was dealt. Since they wanted to impede her, they would have to pay an exorbitant price. Compared to her original plan, the present situation was actually even more beneficial for the human race army. The more the masters from the Black Ink clan focused on her, the less pressure the humans faced. In fact, if she managed to kill off enough royal lords, she would undoubtedly be helping the allied armies secure the final victory. Thus, Zhang Ruoxi was not upset by the Black Ink clan's actions. On the contrary, it suited her just fine. The royal lords came at her one after the other. They all turned into corpses under the Heaven's Order sword, but even so, none of those from the Black Ink clan showed any inclination to retreat. For both the human race and the Black Ink clan, this was the final battle that would decide their fate. They could not back down no matter what. This was a make-or-break battle that would determine who would go down in history as the ultimate victor. Martial Peak. Chapter 5989. Zhang Ruoxi's Persistence. Zhang Ruoxi persistently swung her sword, and every swing of her sword brought about significant results. Ever since her return, no fewer than 300 royal lords had died at her hands in just 2 days. That was an extremely terrifying number. It had to be said that there were only a few dozen Ninth-Order masters among the human race at present. The number of royal lords was many times more than the number of Ninth-Order masters. Furthermore, the inheritance accumulated in the primordial heaven's source grand restriction over millions of years could not be underestimated. Even though Zhang Ruoxi had slaughtered so many royal lords, many more royal lords were surrounding Zhang Ruoxi and the two giant spirit gods still. Zhang Ruoxi relentlessly slaughtered her enemies, and the movement of drawing her sword had almost become an instinctive reaction by now. The Black Ink clan had shifted the focus of the battle around her, which certainly resolved the crisis that had been looming over the human race army. At this moment, the allied armies of the human race and the small stone race finally regained their ability to hold their own against the Black Ink clan, even though they continued to face some pressure on the main battlefield. The situation was no longer as hopeless as before, where their defeat had been imminent and there was no hope for victory. The black ink clouds condensed from the dissipated black ink strength had reached extreme concentration. Even the Ninth Order Masters felt apprehensive when they saw the dense black ink clouds that encompassed the huge void. Aside from Zhang Ruoxi and the two giant spirit gods, nobody could easily venture into the depths of the black ink clouds to fight against the Black Ink clan. Meanwhile, the immaculate white wings behind Zhang Ruoxi's back began to glow with a faint yellow and blue hue. The subtle change resembled an omen of something to come. At a certain moment, one of the royal lords fearlessly charged towards a Ninth Order small stone race master. He gathered all his strength in his fist and punched the personal guard with all his might. The personal guard staggered from the blow, then it immediately followed up with a violent counterattack that immediately killed the royal lord. Although the small stone race personal guard was equivalent to Ninth Order Masters, these were currently joined in a 9 palaces formation with Zhang Ruoxi as its core. Any one of them could borrow the power of the battle formation at any time, so their current strength could no longer be judged by their mere cultivation alone. It could be said that Zhang Ruoxi and her 8 personal guards were one. The attacks unleashed by any party in the battle formation carried the culmination of their combined powers. Even if the royal lords were strong, they could not withstand such attacks. Therefore, many royal lords had died at the hands of the personal guard over the last 2 days. The personal guard who slaughtered the royal lord earlier prepared to make its next move, but just as it raised its fist to attack, its hand shattered to dust. It was immediately followed by its arm, which then spread to its body. In the blink of an eye, the powerful personal guard was reduced to a pile of rubble. The surrounding royal lords and territory lords besieging it froze in surprise. When Zhang Ruoxi returned, her personal guard had all been covered in deep cracks. It was only natural for the surrounding royal lords and territory lords to notice such an obvious thing. They initially thought that the personal guards wouldn't last for long, which is why they targeted them while simultaneously attacking Zhang Ruoxi. It was not until they paid a horrendous price that they realized one thing. These personal guards might look like they were about to fall apart at any moment, but they remained capable of unleashing a despairing amount of power with every blow. That was until this moment. In the end, the personal guard could not withstand the pressure of the drawn-out battle and shattered to pieces. At the same time, the yellow and blue hue of the wings behind Zhang Ruoxi's back increased significantly when the personal guard crumbled to dust. Fortunately, Zhang Ruoxi seemed to have anticipated the situation and immediately switched the battle formation to the 8 trigrams formation. An increasingly violent barrage of attacks ensued. After the first personal guard shattered to pieces, the Black Ink clan suddenly saw hope in regard to their struggle to defeat Zhang Ruoxi. Their assault only became more and more aggressive as a result. Half a day later, the second personal guard shattered to pieces and the 8 trigrams formation subsequently changed to the 7 stars formation. Another half-day passed, and the third one broke apart. When Zhang Ruoxi led her personal guard against Mo, they sustained indelible damage during the battle. If there had been enough time, she would have allowed them to rest and recover. Unfortunately, they were in the middle of a large-scale battle. There was no time for them to even catch their breaths, much less recuperate from their wounds. They only managed to persist until now because the intensity of the current battle paled in comparison to her solo battle against Mo. Even so, her personal guard had finally reached their limits. One after another, they crumbled to pieces. Their destruction also signified that the battle formation was steadily weakening. As the battle formation weakened, the power they could exert was also considerably reduced. At the same time, the yellow and blue hue of the wings behind her back became extremely obvious. When the 6th personal guard shattered, Zhang Ruoxi forcefully changed the battle formation to the most basic 3 fortunes formation. At that moment, the Black Ink clan finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. It would not take much longer to defeat her. A voice abruptly sounded in Zhang Ruoxi's mind. Silly girl, you can't carry on in such a reckless manner. At this rate, you will soon struggle to maintain the balance between yin and yang. You will die if that happens. In the chaotic dead territory, Zhang Ruoxi spent 2,000 years harmonizing the power of yin and yang using her Heaven's Order bloodline. By doing so, her strength surged to unprecedented heights. She rapidly grew from an 8th Order master to a mighty existence who could fight against Mo alone. Nevertheless, she was still just a master at the peak of the 9th Order without the power she was granted by the burning light and serene glimmer. Previously, she had maintained a balance between the powers of yin and yang with her bloodline, and both Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan had remained sleeping deep within her body. However, they were beginning to regain consciousness as a result of her continuous fights and the deaths of her personal guard. That was not a good thing for her. The situation indicated that her bloodline was starting to have trouble maintaining a balance between the power of yin and yang. Just as Big Brother Huang said, if she were to lose control now, a master at the peak of the 9th Order like her would not be able to withstand the pressure of their rampaging power and would instantly perish. Zhang Ruoxi remained silent. Forming the Three Fortunes formation with her 2 remaining personal guards, she persisted in her slaughter. At this moment, the number of Black Ink clansmen gathered around her had reduced significantly. Their numbers were far less than their initial numbers due to her desperate slaughter of her enemies. No matter how many there was bound to be a time when they were completely obliterated. At this juncture, the masters from the Black Ink clan were no longer as desperate as they were before though. Instead, they constantly wandered around her and forced her to expend her energy while keeping themselves safe from harm. They were evidently waiting for the destruction of her 2 remaining personal guards. Once she lost the support of the battle formation, the threat she posed towards the Black Ink clan would be greatly reduced. Realizing that, Big Brother Huang sighed and said no more. He knew that Zhang Ruoxi couldn't stop fighting at this time. After all, this battle was related to the survival of the entire human race. The slightest wavering would lead to their eternal doom. There was only one thing he could do for her at this moment. He attempted to cooperate with Big Sister Lan, trying to coordinate the power of the yin and yang in her body and prevent the balance between their respective strengths from being broken. Unfortunately, what they could do was extremely limited. The situation gradually developed in the direction that the Black Ink clan were hoping for. When the 7th personal guard shattered to pieces, it became impossible for Zhang Ruoxi to form a battle formation with just her last personal guard. The Black Ink clan had been waiting a long time for this very moment, and they immediately swarmed forward and tore the last personal guard apart. In an instant, Zhang Ruoxi sunk into the dire situation of fighting a solo battle. Meanwhile, Ade and Aer were also being restrained by many masters from the Black Ink clan. They could not break free to help her. Death slowly approached her. Just as she was at her most vulnerable, something resembling a violent torrent suddenly tore through the dense layers of the Black Ink clan army, and swiftly approached the battlefield where she was located. It was none other than the human race army that had been fighting fiercely this whole time. Martial Peak. Chapter 5990, The Divine Spirits. When the human race army first departed from the No-Return Pass on their second crusade, there were over 20 million masters. Unfortunately, their numbers had dwindled by more than half at this moment. What's more, their current numbers were only possible because the small stone race army had withstood the brunt of the pressure from their enemies. If not for the small stone race army, the human race army would have been defeated in battle long ago. Countless heroes fell on this vast battlefield. The severed limbs and dismembered corpses of the Black Ink clan littering the void were basically a manifestation of their military merits. The period when Zhang Ruoxi had penetrated the depths of the void and fought with Mo had been the most difficult for the human race army. Countless Black Ink clansmen had besieged and intercepted the humans, leading to the deaths of many brave soldiers. Even the 9th Order masters had suffered several casualties, with their deaths hitting morale particularly harshly. However, the pressure faced by the human race army decreased substantially when Zhang Ruoxi returned with her battle formation of personal guard. She was the reason why so many masters from the Black Ink clan were killed. In such a fierce and chaotic battlefield, the slightest negligence could be fatal. Most of the human race masters on the battlefield were unaware of Zhang Ruoxi's dire state. Be that as it may, how could Mi Jingluan, who had been keeping an eye on the overall situation on the battlefield, be oblivious to her circumstances? The Black Ink clan had shifted the focus of the battle to Zhang Ruoxi. During this period, Mi Jingluan could only watch anxiously as the personal guard around her were destroyed one by one until she fell into a critical condition. Zhang Ruoxi was undoubtedly one of the keys to winning this war. If she were defeated and killed, then the human race army would lose their only hope at victory. Therefore, she had to be protected no matter the cost. Even though that was the case, what strength did the human race army have to help her right now? Mi Jinglong racked his brains for an answer but could not think up a good plan. Recklessly charging forward with what remained of the human race army without a suitable plan would not help her. In fact, his actions would only place the humans in greater danger instead. At this moment, the human race army could borrow the strength of the small stone race army to offset the pressure from their enemies. However, that was only possible thanks to the cooperation between the human race army and the small stone race army. If they charged out, they would be separated from the small stone race army. Under such circumstances, the pressure that the humans would have to withstand on their own was unfathomable. At the critical moment, a blood-drenched Yang Shao suddenly rushed towards Mi Jingluan, and after a brief conversation, the latter made up his mind. Under his command, the human race army instantly condensed their forces into an attack formation, broke through the Black Ink clan's heavy encirclement, and charged towards Zhang Ruoxi like a violent storm. At this moment, many top masters from the Black Ink clan had been slaughtered by Zhang Ruoxi, and out of those that remained, more than 100 royal lords were working together to restrain Ade and Aer while nearly 200 surrounded Zhang Ruoxi. Therefore, the human race army was not facing much pressure at the moment. It could even be said that the Black Ink clan no longer considered the human army a worthy opponent. As long as the royal lords defeated Zhang Ruoxi, the humans would be helpless to resist when they finally turned around to deal with them. The Black Ink clan's underestimation was the reason the human race army successfully broke out of the encirclement. The strange movements of the human race army naturally caught the attention of many masters from the Black Ink clan. They might not know what the human race army was planning, but they had finally pushed Zhang Ruoxi to the brink of desperation after sacrificing so many of their masters. How could they allow for any external interference at this time? Dozens of royal lords immediately turned around and charged towards the human race army while a massive number of Black Ink clan soldiers pursued the humans from the rear. Under these circumstances, the human race army would be facing enemies from the front and back if they did not quickly escape the besiegement of the royal lords. Only an extremely disastrous ending awaited them if they were engulfed by the enemy in their current state. When the royal lords took action, Zhang Ruoxi also made her move. She attempted to slash her way through the heavy blockade and join the human race army. However, numerous masters from the Black Ink clan fearlessly threw themselves at her to obstruct her path. They did not seem to hesitate even though their lives were on the line. Hence, she was successfully prevented from escaping for some time. By this time, Zhang Ruoxi was exhausted beyond her limits. After she departed from the chaotic dead territory, she rushed to the battlefield without delay. Once she arrived, she not only fought countless royal lords, but she also expended her strength to open the void corridor that connected to the chaotic dead territory. Afterwards, she delved into the depths of the opening in the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction and wreaked havoc there for some time before she engaged Mo in an intense battle. It could be said that she had not rested at all since she stepped foot on the battlefield. She had simply been moving from battle to battle without any breaks in between. Therefore, she could only bring out 70% of her full strength. The most obvious change was her combat effectiveness. She used to be able to kill a royal lord in one blow, but now it took her multiple strikes to kill one. It would not be easy for her to join up with the human race army when she was being besieged by so many masters from all directions. At this moment, a figure abruptly soared into the sky. Raising both hands high, he clenched his fists and roared furiously, "Burn!" The 2 marks on his clenched fists flashed with a blinding light. 7 figures rushed into the sky behind him. Every one of them also had mysterious marks shining brightly on the backs of their hands. These marks indicated that these people were blessed by the sun's burning light and moon's serene glimmer. Yang Kai had brought these marks from the chaotic dead territory and bestowed them to 10 divine spirits many years ago. These divine spirits had been scattered throughout the various battlefields. Thanks to the great sun and moon marks in their possession, they could mobilize and transform the power of the yellow and blue crystals into purifying light. Consequently, they were essential to the logistical support of the human race army. It was precisely thanks to this method that the threat of the Black Ink strength to the human race was greatly reduced. The purifying Black Ink pills alone would not have been enough otherwise. Even before this incident, These divine spirits had been mobilizing the power of the great sun and moon marks constantly during the war. So many small stone race soldiers had died on the battlefield that they could easily summon a large burst of the purifying light without much effort. In this way they could not only purify the battlefield, but they could also cause great damage to the Black Ink clan, killing two birds with one stone. When the human race army charged in Zhang Ruoxi's direction, the divine spirits with the great sun and moon marks quickly activated the marks on the backs of their hands under Yang Zhao's leadership. Zhang Ruoxi, who was besieged by countless royal lords, saw the scene from a distance and immediately understood their plan. A smile appeared on her exhausted face. Feeling the strength of the people around her, she knew she was not fighting alone. It was just that she had never even contemplated what they were about to attempt, much less tested it, so she did not know if she would succeed. "Seniors, please assist me." Closing her eyes, she gripped the Heaven's Order sword tightly with both hands and pleaded. The sighs of Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan sounded in unison, but they did not refuse her. In the next moment, the wings behind Zhang Ruoxi's back glowed in two-colored light. When she opened her eyes, the color of her eyes had also changed. One eye was yellow and the other eye was blue. It was a strange sight to behold. At the same time, with Yang Xiao in the lead, the two marks on the backs of the hands of the divine spirits abruptly burst forth and transformed into a two-colored light that enveloped their bodies as a powerful divine sense simultaneously penetrated their knowledge seas. It was the divine senses of the burning light and serene glimmer. Under normal circumstances, they would never allow any external divine sense to encroach on their minds. However, they abandoned all defenses at this moment and allowed the divine sense to link with their own. One by one, the eyes of the divine spirits went blank as though they had lost themselves. "Link!" Zhang Ruoxi cried out. With herself as the source point, various rays of aura instantly connected with each other across the distance and became closely intertwined. Her aura, which had initially begun to dwindle, suddenly surged and shook the surrounding void. The royal lords paled at the sight. Success! Relief washed over Mi Jingluan at the sight. This was Yang Zhao's suggestion. When the 8 personal guards shattered to pieces, it became impossible for Zhang Ruoxi to form a battle formation. She would never escape from the besiegement of so many masters from the Black Ink clan in her current condition, so it was only a matter of time before she suffered a tragic death. The Black Ink clan would be free to attack the human race army once Zhang Ruoxi died, which would undoubtedly result in the human race's defeat. Be that as it may, the human race army had no extra resources to spare in their current condition. The very idea of helping Zhang Ruoxi was nothing more than a fool's dream unless somebody could form a new 9 palaces formation with her. Although they had enough Ninth Order masters to fulfill the requirements to form a 9 palaces formation, it was not easy for them to actually pull off such a feat even if 8 Ninth Order masters were sent to help Zhang Ruoxi. Even if they trusted her wholeheartedly, it would be impossible for them to join forces and form a 9 palaces formation in such a short time. After all, this was not solely a matter of trust but also of compatibility. That was why Yang Xiao had suggested attempting to form the 9 palaces formation with the divine spirits who owned the great sun and moon marks instead. He believed that they might achieve a pleasantly surprising result. The great sun and moon marks were derived from the burning light and serene glimmer sources. Since Zhang Ruoxi had united the power of yin and yang with her bloodline, her body was brimming with the source strength of the burning light and serene glimmer. In other words, to her, Yang Xiao and the other divine spirits should not be that much different from her destroyed small stone race personal guard. At this point, their only option was to attempt this unprecedented feat. If they succeeded, then it would be a joyous success. If they failed, then there was nothing that could be done regardless. In any case, they would only know the result after they made the attempt. For that reason, Mi Jingluan ordered the entire human army to charge out and separate from the ranks of the small stone race army. It was their final desperate attempt to overturn their current predicament. If this plan failed, they would not only fail to rescue Zhang Ruoxi, but also face the imminent destruction of the human race army. Fortunately, the plan had worked. When the power of the 9 palaces formation enveloped the enormous void, Mi Jingluan smiled from the bottom of his heart. Dozens of royal lords were currently on the way to intercept the human race army, and bombarded them with a storm of powerful secret techniques before they even arrived. The defenses of the human race army could be said to have fallen apart at this moment, with only the Ninth Order masters being capable of blocking such an onslaught. Just as the Ninth Order masters were confronting the royal lords though, The hollow-eyed divine spirits charged forward with Yang Xiao in the lead. Every one of these divine spirits was enveloped in a blue and yellow light, and the aura surrounding them was so strong that the void shuddered in their presence. Yang Xiao headed straight towards one of the royal lords, and under that royal lord's astonished gaze, Yang Xiao slammed his fist forward. Half of the royal lord's body instantly exploded into mist when the punch landed. Meanwhile, Yang Xiao did not stop his movements and charged towards the second royal lord with a blank expression on his face. Yang Xiao was an ancient dragon, equivalent to a peak 8th Order master. Naturally, killing a royal lord in one blow was the result of the battle formation and not his own strength. It was a pity that the attack cost him a heavy price. The arm he used to punch the royal lord became twisted and broke, with blood pouring out of it from multiple wounds. Most of the divine spirits displayed similar performances. With no leader coordinating their movements, the royal lords blocking the divine spirits were swiftly cut down without much resistance. The remaining royal lords were frightened and quickly moved aside to open up a path. Such a feat was only possible because Yang Xiao and the others were divine spirits. The physical body of each divine spirit was extremely powerful in comparison to any other existence. If they were ordinary 8th Order human masters who had supported Zhang Ruoxi in this battle formation instead, their bodies would not have been able to withstand the backlash from launching such powerful attacks. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.